So you want me to tell you the story of my life?
Like I said, that's what I do. I interview people. I'm a collector of lives.
Welcome to Table Talk. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. This is the show where I go one-on-one with a creator, author, illustrator, publisher, or other mover and shaker in the world of tabletop games, video games, TV, movies, or any other area of the geekverse.
You followed me here, didn't you?
Yeah, I suppose I did. You seem very interesting. This is where you live?
Yes, this is my home. Welcome.
So, what do you do?
I'm a vampire.
That's something I haven't heard before.
Guests have included individuals such as Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels, creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and even the author of Star Wars, A Pirate's Price.
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. I haven't gotten to talk to him yet, but maybe sometime in the future. But how about Brian Cullen, the creator of the vast, grim, dark horror RPG and sculptor of the world of Revelo monster busts? Mark Tassin, the creator of the world of Italtus, head of Mechanical Muse, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. I've spoken with Jeff Engelstein, game designer and former commentator on the Dice Tower. He and I got deep into the statistics, probability, and psychological function of dice in tabletop games. Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games and crowdfunder extraordinaire. He's published many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. I've spoken with Sydney Engelstein from Indie Boards and Cards to talk about what it really takes to publish a board game in today's environment and what it would take for you to get published if you were trying to get a publisher for your board game. I've spoken with Ajit George about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft and his development of the Journey Through the Radiant Citadel Dungeons & Dragons book. Let's see, who else have I spoken to?
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne, and the goddess of death.
Yes, I really appreciate her taking the time to speak with me. That was a great interview. I've also spoken with Cameron Pasha, a writer and novelist who's been working in Hollywood for over 20 years. His projects have included Emmy and Golden Globe nominated Sleeper Cell, Kings, Nikita, and Roswell, New Mexico. His analysis and commentary have been very popular on YouTube. I've gotten to speak with Paul Shadow, the former network executive who has made quite a splash here on YouTube with his reaction videos to current movies and films. He and I discussed the status of independent film and web productions online today. Brianna De Silva is a reoccurring guest on the show and a very popular one at that. She's an author and director, and she was also the co-writer of the cultist comedy web show that's here on the channel. She and I regularly meet to study and analyze stories. I've also gotten to speak with of the Positive Fandom channel. She's an ally in our effort to be a positive and constructive force in the Geekverse. Are you ready? Have you got your drink? Are you all settled in? You might want to buckle up because it could be a wild ride. We're about to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and the Geekverse through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger. Ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is going to be a light and casual time here on Table Talk. We are going to be discussing Top Gun Maverick and what made it such a fantastic movie. And I'm joined here tonight with Doug Burton. Welcome, Doug.
Hey, how you doing?
It is so good to have you. I said, that we need a chill time. I feel like I've been going and going and going. So a chill time is really good. So I'm glad that this is the perfect movie, I feel like, for a chill discussion.
Yeah, it's lighthearted. It's easy. It's not Star Trek deep or existential.
Yeah, we have plenty more of that to do. But I was like, just with everything, it seems like I've been going for weeks. It's like, all right, we need something chill here. So this is a good one to go. Let's see. So I was actually bringing up, share screen. Look, here's Faraway. Oh, right here. Here is Faraway Bird. You want to talk about what you've got here going on, Doug?
So, yeah, most of you already know, but I am the author of historical fiction. It's an award-winning historical fiction book, Faraway Bird. It's about Byzantine Empress Theodora. I have started working on book 2 now that I have finished my work in progress, or it was a work in progress. We're moving into the publishing phase to it. The Heroine's Labyrinth, which is a story structure designed around the study of heroine-centric stories. It's called The Heroine's Labyrinth, and it should come out either late this year or early, like January of 2024.
So you've turned the corner now, and we're also starting working on another story now.
Yeah, what I wanted to do was write part 2 to this right away, but while studying hero-centric stories, this whole other model popped up, and I got so absorbed in it that I kind of couldn't let it go. It was like hanging over my head, so I couldn't even focus on fiction. I wrote it down, got it out, and now I'm pleased to be at the finish line there and getting into the book production phase, which is a whole different animal. But it's given me some time to sit back and start writing fiction again, which is what I love.
Well, that is fantastic. I will go over here to say that Goodnight Sword is my latest book and the first book in the Tales of Rabavania, which is an obvious takeoff of Goodnight Moon. It is a world of gallantry, chivalry, and rabbits based on the classic story Goodnight Moon. This is already finished on Kickstarter, but I have a link here. If you click this link, let me go ahead and put the Goodnight Sword Kickstarter over here in the chat. Goodnight Sword Kickstarter. Because if you go there and you click on request a late pledge, you'll be taken to a form where you can fill out a request for a late pledge. I'll be taking late pledges until probably like Friday or Saturday, something like that. I'm expecting Kickstarter to send me the money on Friday, and then that's when I will finish sending out. I've already sent out some of the books. Some books have already been sent out, so they have already been sent. But if you need a late pledge, I'm going to disable that probably like Thursday or Friday, something in there, because then by then Kickstarter will have delivered me the money, and then between Friday and over the weekend, my plan is to send out everybody's books. So if some have already been sent out, if you haven't filled out your survey to get me your address, please go ahead and fill out your survey, because I'm going to be wrapping this up in like a week or something like that. But if you didn't get it, please click on this. You can also find the animated audio book there. If you like it, you can click the request a late pledge, and I will individually invoice you through Shopify. And then I will send your book out this week as well. So that's what's going on over here.
Awesome.
I guess I should say we've got a lot of stuff actually on YouTube that's going on. So tonight, Doug and I are talking about, obviously, Top Gun Maverick. This is what we're going to talk about. Tomorrow night, Michelle Smith is coming back. So we'll do a part 2 of Michelle Smith tomorrow night at the Wednesday, 7 o'clock. I got to get ready for that. Thursday, we will probably do a members-only stream. So we'll do a members-only hangout stream. Last time, it was fantastic. It was so much fun. The members came on. I invited people on the stream. I was sitting here painting miniatures, but we invited some people on the stream. Sable Phoenix and James Bacon actually came on the stream to just chat and talk. So
cool.
We all just hung out and we talked. So that's Thursday. I'll do another hangout stream. So if you want to hang out and you actually want to be on the stream, I can have up to 10 people at a time on the stream. So join the channel, become a channel member, and we'll do that on Thursday. On Friday, I'm going to try to do dinner and a board game. We'll be playing more dinner and a board game. Then on Saturday, now this is all, of course, we have the morning grind. It's 9:30 in the morning every morning. But then also on Saturday, RM of the Positive Fandom channel. She also is part of the Burn Network. She is hosting a watch party of The Cultist Season 2. So, and I will be on that with her as well. So that's on Saturday. So there's going to be like 2 streams a day from here until Saturday.
You might be crazy.
I know, it's an insane amount of streaming. It is an insane amount of streaming. It really
That's a lot, man. I don't know how you do it. You keep up with all of it, and you're always on the go.
And I try to do some other things too. Sometimes it's too much. But
yeah, I hear you.
All right. So that's what's happening. All right. So I was watching Top Gun Maverick again. I didn't get completely finished with it, but I think I have my I do have my notes here, and for all of this, this is I really enjoyed this movie, but I wanted to make sure that it was fresh in my mind, so I'd been watching it again.
But again, it's one of those. It was a longer movie, so I was like, oh, I didn't quite get finished with it. But I think I have my notes here. So let's get started then. Top Gun Maverick. Doug, how do you want to start with this?
So, well, I guess we'll point out some things that may be known and may not be known. One, it is insane how successful this movie was. It's a sequel that came out 36 years after the original, which is pretty nuts by itself. Two, it was more successful than the original, which is always difficult to pull off. Three, I think it added to the lore of the original, meaning it strengthened everything about the Top Gun franchise. Also, one thing I did not know that y'all might find pretty interesting is this movie made $1.5 billion globally, which is, I think, 12th best, highest grossing film globally of all time. And it's the 5th highest grossing film in the domestic market all time. I think around $780 million. That is a ton of money. And of course, this came out post-pandemic. It was actually shot and filmed and was supposed to come out in 2020. And the studios
hugely delayed.
Yeah, totally delayed. And the studios wisely sat on this film until, better times. And what a brilliant move that was to release it, in 2022 instead of 2020. But one thing I found fascinating, so obviously this was the top grossing movie of 2022. But one thing that many people may not know that I didn't know, did y'all know that Top Gun was the top grossing film in 1986? It was the highest grossing film of 1986.
I think I did know that. I think I knew that when Top Gun itself, I mean, the Top Gun, see, Sable Phoenix says Top Gun is a much better film than the original, but I watched the original. Like, I'm telling you, like, Doug, you said that, like, sometimes late night you'll watch some of the Star Treks. I'm telling you that the original Top Gun is one that I will turn on a lot.
Oh, I love the original Top Gun. I would say the one drawback of making such an excellent sequel, and we'll talk about this more, but the impact of gravity and speed and the motion and the effects, which are so authentic in this film. When I went back to watch Top Gun 1986, I was like, man, it doesn't quite have that punch that the new one had. You know what I'm saying? So, like, you could tell, like, there's a lot of super close-ups and everything. Now, that said, I can get over it. I still love Top Gun 1986. It's a classic. It's a part of Americana. Everyone knows what Top Gun is and means. It has entered pop culture in full. It's one of the big movies for Tom Cruise. So it's just interesting that Top Gun Maverick, one of the highest grossing films of all time, and clearly the highest grossing film of 2022, was following suit in the original, the highest grossing film of 1986. So Top Gun has done well with its audiences, especially in the United States, but also globally when these movies have come out. So I find that pretty awesome for Top Gun.
Yeah, so this is one of the few movies, it seems like lately, that can completely deliver to its audience. And because it did that, it was rewarded in an extremely big way.
How many times did you see it at the theater?
Sable Phoenix, I was thinking about that when Sable Phoenix says I watched this movie twice in the theaters, and I know I watched it twice. It may have been 3 times.
So
I'm trying to remember if I actually went to see it 3 times or not. I know I went to see it twice.
Okay. So it was weird. I saw it 4 times in the theater.
Oh, whoa. Okay.
But I took my wife out for like a date night. I was like, let's go see Top Gun Maverick. We came home that night. The kids were like half asleep. We're like, you wait till you guys see Top Gun Maverick. You guys are going to love this movie. So we went the next day to take the kids. The kids loved it so much. We ended up seeing it again next week. And then someone said, have you seen it in IMAX? I said, no. Like, you have to see it in IMAX. So we went a 4th time to see it in IMAX. So, and by the way, we loved it every single time we went.
So I think that I went to see it with my brother Seth. So I was like, let's go see it. So Seth came over and met me at the movie theater and we watched it. And then I think it was right before Father's Day. It came out before Father's Day.
Mm-hmm.
And so we enjoyed it so much. My brother and I enjoyed it. That what I said for Father's Day, I took my dad to see it. But see, this is how a movie grows. Because I went to see it with Seth. We were like, let's just go see this. So we just went out for we don't really do like brothers movie day or anything all that often. But I was like, let's go see this. Let's go see this. So my brother came down and watched it with me. And then we went and then we watched it. We enjoyed it. We loved it. I said, all right, I tell you what, for Father's Day, Dad, I'll take you to go see this movie. And then we went to Buffalo Wild Wings after that. So that's why I know I went to see it twice. But then my dad, after watching it, took his wife, my stepmother. That was like, okay, now after this, like the next week, they went to see it. So that's the chain reaction of this movie that made it such a big hit, that when people went to see it, they were like, oh my God, you got to go take somebody else to see it. Like, oh my God, you got to go see this.
Yeah. I mean, everyone that I met, I was like, you got to go see Top Gun Maverick. Like, you just got to go. Like it's, you'll love the movie. I'm like, it's hard to believe at the time. I was like, it's hard to believe that I'm saying this, but it's better than the original, which at the time, last year when this movie first came out, was an odd thing to say, because the original is kind of a classic.
The original is definitely a classic.
So at the time, now I think today everyone knows Top Gun Maverick is like one of the top movies of all time. But right when it came out, it still felt awkward to tell people like emphatically, you got to go see it. It's better than the original. You will feel every G-force that they do. It's not CGI or practical effects. These are
right.
People in cockpits going at Mach 2, or you can see their eyes rolling back in their head. Which, by the way, all that's real. I don't know if you seen any of the making of it, but my kids really got into Top Gun Maverick. They loved it, and they really got into Tom Cruise. We found out that he did all his stunts, and the kids started searching for him on YouTube, and there's a couple YouTube videos about Tom Cruise's top 10 stunts and everything. And that's worth watching. That's pretty amazing by itself. But we found out that during the making of Top Gun Maverick, upon Tom Cruise's insistence to the filmmakers, he agreed to make this film only if they did real footage of the pilots in the cockpits at the actual speeds. So like when they're coming off the carrier and he's bobbing his head and they're going up in the air, the eyes are rolling. That's not the actors acting. That's the actors about to actually pass out, sitting in the back seat while a real aviation pilot is going at high speed up and down and all sorts of stuff. So that's why that authenticity, which is part of what sells this movie, is all there. It is all real.
Yes. I don't know where I was going with that, but yes, that is there. This movie deserves to be studied. This is where I was going with this. Is that there was a major mistake on Brianna's part.
Oh, Brianna made a mistake?
This. Yeah, no, I know, because she watched this before she watched the original Top Gun.
Oh,
I know. I had it on my list to watch the original Top Gun with Brianna, because she and I have a list of movies to watch together. And the original Top Gun was one of them. And I was like, after you watch the original Top Gun, because it's so important, I think, from the filmmaking perspective, from the story perspective, all this, to understand, because you're talking about one of the highest grossing films ever, like of that. I mean, it was of that year, but like, one of the most incredible films that had been shot. Okay. The original Top Gun, you have to understand that. And then when you realize, okay, they made that and it was so incredible. And then here is arguably the most successful sequel in all of.
Hard to argue that based on the box office numbers.
At least based on box office. If you're going just based on box office, it's this. You need to understand the original, and then you need to understand what they did with the sequel. And she didn't watch the original, and then she was like, "No." Somebody said you can just watch the sequel, and she watched the sequel. I was like, "Oh my God!" Had I been there, I would have vetoed that. I was like, "You need to watch the original, especially as a director, which she is, to understand movies. Let's watch the original, then let's watch the sequel."
I was just going to say, as a writer and I think as a director, it'd be interesting to see the contrast in the filming styles. But as a writer, I got this sense on a smaller level with Cobra Kai the ability to take a movie like The Karate Kid, which is so old as well, and to successfully add more to the characters is a clinic in good writing. And Cobra Kai did it, it got a little cyclical, it's hard to do for 5 seasons, but for the most part, Cobra Kai did a phenomenal job of building off Karate Kid. And here you have Top Gun Maverick building off of Top Gun. And I think if you love writing, you got to pay attention to how they did it. How did they maintain the themes of the first film? How did they pick up the threads? And how did they run with it and make it interesting in and of its own right? 36 years later, that's a hell of a feat for a writer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about themes of the movie then.
Okay.
Because I've got 2, and interestingly, they tie into some things we've said about Star Trek.
Really?
Yeah.
Aging?
Right. Yeah. There seem to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it seems like. Okay. Yeah. I said there were 2 themes of this movie that there seem to be. And they're contradictory, but the way they play together is important here. Oh, hey, Zero the Blade.
Awesome.
So the 2 themes that I picked up on were not growing up. What happens if you don't grow up? And that
Peter Pan theme.
Yeah, Peter Pan theme. I think there is a Peter Pan theme in here that what happens if you don't grow up? And that has we can talk about that with Maverick and his position because he doesn't get they talk about how you're not promoted. You should be a senator by now. You should be an admiral. So he is definitely a guy who doesn't grow up.
Great observation.
So we have that theme in here, but it's coupled with a theme of being old.
Well, or where he kind of like Captain Kirk, right?
Yeah,
he rejects Admiral over and over again.
Exactly. Yes.
So there is the theme of, and he says it in this, I'm right where I belong, sir. So there is the idea that advancement for the sake of advancement may not be the goal. The idea of advancing to the place you want to be and then knowing to stay there, which I think that runs counter, and that doesn't cancel it. It doesn't cancel the Peter Pan part of this.
Right. It doesn't.
But it is the opposite side of the coin. It's not necessarily that we're not growing up, but the other side of the coin says, I'm right where I belong. I found my calling, and this is it.
Okay, let's. Okay, yes. So because the interplay between these 2 is what I think makes this. Well, one of the things that makes this movie interesting, because and you do bring up a very important point that we've talked about. Hey, I am where I belong. I don't need to advance beyond this. But we see that the way I would say that this idea of not growing up is seen both in the military context and the non-military context.
Agreed.
So we see this in the military context when the admiral says you should be a 2-star admiral by now or a senator. Okay, we could forgive. That's the first encounter with this theme. And we could forgive this because of what you just said that, well, listen, I'm where I should be. Maybe I shouldn't. So maybe I shouldn't advance. So maybe he is where he should be in terms of his military career. But he is also then shown to be kind of behind in where he should be in terms of family relationships. He's behind in terms of military relationships, but he's very behind in terms of having a wife.
Yeah, where he is in life. Yeah, I see.
Having a child, having a family. He is behind there as well.
Yeah, they kind of open with him like living in a hangar, right? He doesn't have a house. He's like living in a hangar. I'm
gonna grab a beer. Go ahead.
Yeah. Like his personal effects are there. He's got his P-51 Mustang there. So he is living kind of a lonely life, but it also looks like the kind of life that he finds very fulfilling. It doesn't look lonely and depressing. It looks lonely and fulfilling, but still lonely, which obviously this movie addresses in terms of the love relationship with Penny, who, by the way, I thought Jennifer Connelly was spectacular in this. So when I first saw the movie, there was a few things that I thought were just going to be generic because, the first movie had his love interest with, what's her name? Oh my God, I can't believe I'm losing her name.
Kelly McGinnis.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that was a pretty established, well-known 80s cinema, like love, matchup, a power couple of the 80s. It's everyone remembers it, even if it was a little cheesy at times. So this suddenly jettisons her, and now there's this. So at first I thought that this was going to be just like generic love interest number 2, and even on the rewatches now, I just absolutely appreciate Jennifer Connelly's portrayal of Penny Benjamin. I think she's in a lot of ways better. She's a great match for him in this. So anyway, I don't want to get off topic, but there's a lot of stuff that should have been generic in this, and yet either just enough power in the script and just absolutely excellent acting brought more out of these characters than I thought they had a right to be.
But you realize she was mentioned in the original Top Gun.
Yeah, so I pulled that up. I pulled up the script because I watched it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So it was such a great callback then.
It is. So in the script, Goose says, over 5 air traffic control tower, 5 air control towers and 1 admiral's daughter. And then Maverick is like, Penny Benjamin? And then, and then he swears at him. But they mention her name. She's the admiral's daughter that is kind of the anonymous, conquest of Maverick. God. That's kind of loosely mentioned as part of his backstory. But they bring her into this one, and they really flesh her out and really make her a good match for him intellectually, like spiritually. She picks him up when he never gets depressed, but when he's got a few crises of confidence, she's right there a couple times in this movie. So I thought she ended up being a fantastic love interest for Maverick. She was great.
Yeah, I think it does a great job of depicting him as not growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is actually something we deal with a lot. Okay, like in society, that he seems to have not grown up because he's the pilot who's on this, extreme experimental aircraft and things like that, and that's what he's about. But even and my brother picked up on this, and my brother has children, so this is probably why he has picked up on this, because he was like, I thought, because after we watched it the original time, he was like, man, it did such a great job of depicting different eras of life, because at one of the times when he's going out with Penny Benjamin and he brings her up on his, brings her back home on his motorcycle, but her daughter is inside.
Yes.
So you realize what phase of life you're in. Because if you're in your 20s, there wouldn't be a kid in your house when you
There'd be a sock on the door
on a motorcycle. That's not a thing. But that here we're showing, okay, Maverick pulls up after a hot date on his motorcycle. What's supposed to happen? Well, what's supposed to happen does not happen because you know what? The other person has children.
Yeah, she's got responsibilities.
And we're at a different phase of life for that. And I thought that I saw that a lot as a theme throughout this.
Well, I think you make a great point on that, and you're making me rethink certain exchanges within the military structure. Although I think we as the audience are like, hey, that's Maverick. Leave the guy alone. Back off. He's the best pilot. We're on his side. But you see how powerless he is with other characters who maybe they aren't better pilots. In fact, we get the sense that none of Admiral Simpson, the John Hamm, we get a sense that he's not a better pilot than Maverick, but you see the power he has over him simply because he did advance. He grow up.
He grew up in the structure. Yes.
Right. So he grew up and Maverick didn't. And so when Maverick is teasing him, making jokes, that might be considered a younger man's way of handling, tension or something, make a joke. Admiral Simpson doesn't find it funny. He's like, I just want to lower expectations, sir. And he's just trying to, and then Admiral Simpson's like, let's see. Let's go through your file. You know, the stoic, unamused senior officer. So, you know, you see how it affects him, even though you know he's the better man in the room. In these circumstances, in the structure, he seems sometimes to be a little boxed out, and that causes a lot of conflict in terms of scenes throughout this whole film. So you make a great point, because that sustains that tension, even with Iceman, and we can get into that later. But there's a sense that there's a sense in those scenes with Iceman that the men are equals, believe it or not. Like but you know, Iceman is the senior. He's a major. He's a fleet admiral, I believe, right?
Well, yeah, he's the commander of the Pacific Fleet, right?
Yeah, which is huge. So right. we know that he has that rank, and you see that he has a nice house. He's he's got all this stuff going on. But I did appreciate that, although he had the seniority and everything, when Iceman posted him up, it was really man to man in those conversations, and we can get to that. But that was an example of where Iceman gave him the other version of respect, which is, I may be your senior, I may have advanced, but I see you as my peer, as my equal, as a pilot.
Sable says the only reason he's able to stay at permanent captain level is because Iceman has been covering from all these years.
That's true.
Yeah, you also definitely have that, right? That definitely have that feeling and that understanding. I think that you've got that Maverick has been not growing up, as we've just been talking about, but he has basically this guardian angel, which is Iceman,
100%,
who has been covering for him all of this time.
Well, and this movie is very deliberate about that. They made, I think, 2 or 3 remarks to that effect, that you're only here because of Iceman. Iceman's protecting you. You know, every time you get in trouble, Iceman bails you out. Like they drive that point home. And even while rewatching it this last time for our YouTube discussion, they show the funeral scene with Iceman.
Mm-hmm.
The very next scene, you're grounded, Maverick. You're out. You're next
out. Right,
scene,
yes.
You're out of there.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's
why Iceman had to die. He had to die in this. If that's the dynamic they have, he has to die in this movie.
Well, but that shows the unfortunate, in my opinion, unfair and unfortunate. But one of the problems of his not growing up, he seems to have little power inside the system by staying where he was. And I think we all agree that that's not fair, that he doesn't deserve that kind of stuff, but he doesn't have much recourse. Personally, he has to rely on outside forces. And when Iceman passes away, he has really no recourse to push back, which is really a technically like a tragic scenario.
No, I agree. When you come into Penny's bar and you're introducing all the new pilots that are all the young hotshots, I think in general that was done very well. I did want Bob to be more. This is the introduction of Bob, but this is a comment throughout the film that I wanted him to be more.
Yeah, they really made him kind of a. They didn't go they didn't go full doofus with him, but they went half doofus with him. He seemed a little awkward and goofy, and I guess my problem with that is this is Top Gun. You know, in Top Gun 1986, everyone was a badass. Every single guy was his own universe of badass. The one guy had the cowboy hat. You had Iceman. You had Maverick. You had Goose. Like everyone's a badass. In this one, it's like everyone's a badass, and then there's Bob. And it's like, how did Bob get to make Top Gun? Like, who did he impress? Because he doesn't seem impressive. Luckily, they had just enough here and there to make him competent at times. But
they made him competent at times. But what I think that a weakness of this movie is that they should have made him essential to the mission. Because, like, if he's the technical geek and the nerd, like, okay, fine, let's go with that. And I didn't realize until I was just watching this afternoon that somebody does say that his name, not only is he Bob, but why is his why is his call sign Bob? It's because he's baby on board.
Oh yeah, that's what
I didn't realize that until this watch through. but he should have been absolutely essential at the end mission. He should have been essential to the mission because he's so technical. The ability to actually make some type of something like that. So that I do think is a weakness of the movie. Bob's character did not end the way it should have. He should have been absolutely essential to the mission because he's a technical genius.
Well,
that should have been part of it.
A great contrast, Hudson in Aliens. He comes across as a little overconfident and a little unlikable. And then in the middle of the movie, Hudson comes across as cowardly, but he's technically the expert. He runs the bypass. He does all the technical stuff. And then Hudson is redeemed. So there's an arc there. With Bob, it's just kind of like doofusness as an accessory. Like,
It's
just there.
He doesn't fulfill what he should have fulfilled.
Yeah, it's not like he rises above it. He's just kind of like unimpressive.
Like in the most immediate, like in the most obvious sense. Like when they're trying to strike the target, like they should have taken like some type of damage to some kind of sensor that only Bob knows how to rewire.
Yeah, even if you R2D2 level.
Right, exactly. Like right. Like, oh my God, if we've taken damage, and if we didn't have Bob, he wouldn't have been able to do this.
Yeah, see, I agree. What's interesting, so like the first time I saw Maverick as well, I had my first thought, and this is initial impression that did not last, was that, love interest number 2, Jennifer Connelly, generic. I was like, okay, this must be the generic love interest. And my second thought when they all entered the pool hall bar was that this is generic young guys coming in, generic group of new next gen pilots. But all those characters grew on me. I don't view them as generic. Even the ones that are really generic, like Yale. There's some that are really background guys. Coyote was considered a background guy, but he's the one that passes out and has to kind of come out of it. All of these guys still have their moments in the film, and upon multiple viewings, I view them as the next generation of Top Gun pilots. Like they have all kind of stuck with me. Phoenix, the female pilot, she was awesome in this and struck me as highly competent and capable. I like Hangman. He at times I thought he was maybe a little over the top adversarial, but even he has grown on me, and he does have an arc in this film. So I agree with you. What I thought should have been generic next gen XYZ pilots turned out to be actual characters for me. And that I did not expect. I did not expect that to work for me.
And this could completely just be me. This could completely just be me. That when she rings the bell, when Jennifer Connelly rings the bell, Penny rings the bell, and it's like, what's the problem here? And she points to the sign. I misread that scene originally, because it says something like, if you disrespect a woman or the Navy or put your cell phone on the table, then you're screwed, basically, right? And so, but because the first thing was if you disrespect a woman, and because his response, the thing that he had said immediately before that was, you look good.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And so I completely misunderstood that scene, because he says, you look really, she was like, don't go there, whatever. He was like, you look really good. And then she rings the bell, and then she reads the sentence or on the sign. And it's, if you and I thought that it was, I thought when I watched it that it was a commentary on disrespecting her as a woman at a bar.
Oh, thank God that's not what it was.
Yeah, but it was actually not, because he does, like, it's strange because the response was the third item. If you disrespect a woman, disrespect the Navy, or you put your cell phone on the bar. Because then I realized, as I was watching it again this time, he holds up his cell phone as he's watching it. And it's about the third thing. But I had interpreted that on the first time. I was like, did he really disrespect her, though? Okay, but it actually wasn't that. But it was about the cell phone on the bar that got him in trouble.
Yeah. And I think that whole scenario with Penny is part of what made me like her. She really, there's a part of me when I watch that, I'm like, man, that's a real kick in the nuts. She's making him pay for all these drinks. Like, man, that's a tough one. But it's done in a playful way, even though he probably had to shell out some cash. I liked her. I like Penny. She's very stoic when she flirts with him and very like composed. She flirts like an older woman, and I just think she nailed it. And I found her completely attractive in this. I was like, man, I like Penny in Top Gun Maverick. Like, she's the perfect older woman who could push back against Maverick. You never felt that she was like, like not his equal. Like, you always felt she could hold her own with him. But yeah, I did like that he had to pick up all those drinks, even to the point where they throw him out of the bar.
And they even throw him out. Right. Yes. I mean, there are so many things there that mirror. I guess we didn't actually start with this, but we could have. But so many things that show respect in this movie to the fans of the original, which is something that is so often. When I watched the movie in the theaters, which I actually didn't see, it's probably an extra feature or something like that. But that Tom Cruise's "Thank You to the Fans" that comes up before, I loved it. I did absolutely loved that too. That this is something that they acknowledge is important to people, and they acknowledge the cultural significance of it.
Yep.
And they feel that, at least this is the feeling that I had when I saw that it seemed like Tom Cruise understood all of that, and that he is trying his best to deliver something that respects all of that. And I think that was huge.
And just to add, I think it came across as very sincere.
Yeah, I think it did too.
Now that we know the movie and the quality of the film and how fun it was, thinking back to that, now it's like, man, they were just really out to win over the fans, and the fans rewarded the hell out of the filmmakers and for this movie.
I think that is such an important emotional approach or philosophical approach to take to this, because we completely understand in today's world what it's like when somebody says something like, or it feels like, here's the sequel to your Star Trek, or the sequel to your Star Wars, or the sequel to your whatever, name whatever franchise is coming up. We own this, legally, whatever. Like, this is ours now. We're playing with this like it. Right. This is what we've done to it. And when we've experienced a lot of that, but when Tom Cruise came on that on the screen and said that, he made me at least, and I feel like a lot of people realize that, hey, you know what? This is beyond just who legally owns this franchise. Because, I mean, there is that. We understand that. But, like, just because we legally own this doesn't mean that, hey, so it's just ours to play with, and we're going to shove whatever we want to shove down your throat.
Right. And if you don't like it, you're toxic.
Yeah. That was so important to me, and it was such a contrast to other things. Because, even if he didn't get it right.
Yeah, if it was imperfect.
If it was imperfect, like, and I think there are things in the movie that might be imperfect. But yeah, right, exactly. If you approach it with that philosophy and you communicate that to your audience, I mean, that is a big thing. That you're like, listen, I realize what this is, and we have done our best to try to bring you a fantastic movie that is worthy of this franchise. We hope we've succeeded.
So
here we go.
Let me contrast that with Rian Johnson and The Last Jedi.
Yeah, well, Sable Phoenix in that respect is the reason that Maverick succeeded and all the Star Wars coming out has failed.
So
and I agree. All right.
Yes.
So go ahead.
So I have been to pretty much every opening night for Star. Now, when I was a kid, I couldn't go. I would be at the opening weekend. I was only 18 months old when Star Wars came out. It was my first movie ever. But my dad took us to see Empire Strikes Back pretty early on, before it was really early, because I remember them debating how it ended. It wasn't conclusive enough. And then, of course, Return of the Jedi in '83, I went opening weekend. But in 1999, I waited with a good friend of mine for hours to get the first tickets to go see The Phantom Menace. I went to Attack of the Clones first opening night. I went to Revenge of the Sith opening night. And then I continued that with Force Awakens. And then I went also on The Last Jedi. And I remember sitting there in the theater for The Last Jedi, and Rian Johnson comes out. Same thing. Gives a speech about, thank you. I love the fans. Thank you for, this is my love letter to the Star Wars fans. And now when I look back, I'm like, that is BS. It doesn't come across as sincere. It comes across as the opposite. Plus, Ryan never said like, hey, I noticed that a lot of the fans maybe didn't like it. I'm sorry if you didn't like it. I did my best. Maybe maybe years later, he could have said, I could have done better. Maybe I would have changed. Nope. He has doubled that. He doesn't care about the fans. He cares about himself. So over time, his little message to the fans, I think, has aged poorly. Whereas here with Top Gun Maverick, you have Maverick coming on the screen, or Tom Cruise, saying pretty much a similar thing. And yet it rings true because the movie backs him up.
The movie ends up backing up what he said in the beginning. Yes,
100%.
I think that's.
You don't make Luke Skywalker a loser and tell us that you're a big fan of Star Wars,
right?
You know what I'm saying? Like whoever wrote Top Gun Maverick, they didn't show Maverick at some like aviators bar in Nantucket, or in Tijuana. As a washed up nobody who has nothing to offer, with a beard and like the writers didn't do that to Maverick. They really followed through on his character, I think, in a believable way. They didn't make him all knowing, but they gave him his good moments. They gave him conflicts, which I thought were well defined, or adequate for his character. And at the end of the day, he was a hero.
Yeah.
You walk out of the theater and Maverick is a hero, and he's not alone this time,
Well, okay, this actually leads into exactly my next note, was that after you leave the bar scene, which contrasts with Luke Skywalker. I mean, this is actually, I hadn't thought about this directly, but it's very much worth thinking about. Is that after you leave the bar scene and you have the humor of, okay, they've thrown him out, but then they realize, oh my God, that's actually the guy who was about to teach us, right? Because you have the next scene when they're going to go in there. That the movie shows you that Maverick is in fact the best.
I have some notes on that. Yeah.
Okay, you have some notes on that. Okay, so okay, we'll talk about those notes. But I think that's extremely significant to the importance of this. That in the sequences that follow that, it does nothing to undermine Maverick in any way. It reestablishes him as the best.
Well, and I would add, nor does it undermine any of the young pilots.
Well, that's a good point too. That is a good point too.
I never thought to myself. Now, I did think to myself what I think what the movie wanted us to think. Okay, Hangman's a little overconfident. Miles is a little too conservative. He's not going to push the envelope. Like, they had their flaws, but I never thought to myself, none of these guys, except for maybe Bob, none of these guys these guys don't belong here. I was like, ooh, he got one of the best pilots. And they were challenging Maverick, Hangman especially, and Miles Teller, Rooster, very directly challenging him. And the movie portrayed what I would regard as very worthy challenges. These are good kids. They're sharp. Their instincts are good. They might get Maverick, but they didn't. But you got a sense that maybe they were just a little short. Secondly, it wasn't like Maverick just beat them. There were reasons why Maverick beat him, or either one of them. And so there was a lesson to be learned for why they lost. Abandoning the wingman, which was a problem Maverick had in the first one.
Right.
Flying into the sun, a trick that that Hangman had never dealt with before. And then the self-destructive sort of conflict with Rooster when they were spiraling down later. So even when Maverick bested them, there was a sense that he was challenged correctly and the student just came up short. That doesn't bother me. That doesn't make me look down on the students.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Or I never felt that they were overdoing it with Maverick, like, ridiculous. It felt all very natural to me. And like, well, that he's one of the best pilots and he has more experience. That's why he's beating them. And then they showed you how he did it.
So yeah, so I completely agree, and that's what I wish had happened with Luke and Rey or whatever Jedi it was going to be. That if Luke had been Maverick, we would have accepted that in a big way.
Well, yes.
I mean, he doesn't have to be Maverick because the personality is a bit different. I'm talking about just in the context of, okay, we've grown up with this character. We've seen this character become the master. We don't want to see that undermined. We want to see that character playing the master role,
of course,
in a new generation. That's what.
Well, the name, in really quick with Star Wars, the name of Episode 6 is Return of the Jedi. The Jedi never returned, according to the sequel trilogy. They never returned. They skipped over some major stuff if they're saying they gave it a shot and Luke gave up. That's, if true, then the Jedi never returned. It doesn't make any sense from a writing standpoint. And what's weird is I've had debates with friends of mine who defend some of the sequel trilogy, and they're like, well, it makes sense that Luke would, I think it's a good character arc. I'm like, it doesn't make sense. It's not a good character arc. And it doesn't mean that you can tell a story with Luke in the future without conflict. You can have Luke conflicted. You can have problems. You can have issues arise with him and still make him a character who's worthy of progressing along his arc. And I think you nailed it. Top Gun Maverick shows us that you can, in fact, do it while introducing new, younger characters and bolstering both the mentor and the students. Both rise up in this film.
Well, that's a great point, and let me expound on that then, because this is an example of when you have things that are on a superficial level versus a material level.
Yes.
And the audience responds to what's on the spiritual, the superficial, which is the material, versus the underlying spiritual kind of level.
Yep.
And we have that, because you can say that on the physical level, Rey comes to Luke. And so that is a training, on the physical level, Rey is coming to Luke to be trained. But on the spiritual level, once you get to actually what happened in those scenes, it's reversed because Rey teaches Luke something. And that's weird. It's something weird that we don't accept because we're expecting for the mentor to teach the new hero something.
Well, from an archetypal design, from an archetypal pattern, here's the guy that blew up the first Death Star. He's a veteran of the Battle of Hoth. He has fought Vader one-on-one, lost a hand. He fought Vader again, defeated him. He has faced the Emperor and did not turn to the dark side. He may have flirted with it, but he eventually rejected it. He was willing to risk his life in front of the Emperor. He threw away his lightsaber and then helped lead the final, basically the destruction of the second Death Star and the collapse of the Empire. This guy gained nothing from all of that experience? Are you telling me that there's nothing that comes with that? There's no experience?
Still has to be taught something.
What's that?
Like the story as it's written is telling you that he still has to learn things.
Let me tell you, if someone
that's the wrong archetype of the story to go forward.
100%. So here we have Maverick, who hasn't done nearly what Luke Skywalker has done in terms of heroics. Luke is like an intergalactic hero. Maverick was a hotshot pilot who made it to the top, but people basically bet against him because he was too unpredictable. He was a maverick, and then experienced the death of his co-pilot, and then lost his confidence, which is typical of the hero's journey, by the way, the loss of confidence, and then the need to re-engage at a critical moment and face your fears and defeat the enemy, which Maverick does. When a human being, you don't even have to, man or woman, if that happens to you, you're a changed person. You have wisdom, you have knowledge, you have firsthand experience. Firsthand experience alone is of supreme value in a military structure, because let's say you're like, remember Aliens again, Lieutenant Gorman. How many combat drops is this? 2. No confidence in this guy. We don't know about Gorman. He doesn't seem to have ever risked himself. He's never been on many combat drops versus someone like Maverick. And in this movie, they cover that. They're like, Maverick has firsthand real world experience in all the mission elements of this mission, including one of the last pilots to have shot down enemy fighters.
Right. Yeah, they even talk about that. Yeah.
So this has intrinsic value, and the movie calls that out. It doesn't matter if you like the guy. It doesn't matter if he's a little hard to fit into a structure. The guy has experience, and Iceman says that experience matters to this next generation, and it does, and it does. You know, I'll tell you what. If I was a pilot, and they're like, "Hey, Maverick's going to lead this mission, and you're going on it," I'd be scared out of my mind because this mission is pretty tough. But I would follow Maverick into that mission. I'd be like,
and you don't want to be teaching Maverick stuff.
No, yeah. You know what I'm saying? Exactly. If I'm like, hey, Maverick, you better learn to pick yourself up, sir. You know, and then get in. What I'm trying to say is I would follow Maverick into a battle, because who else do you want to fly behind? Just like if I'm in the Star Wars universe, I would want to follow Luke into a battle. This guy has firsthand experience with some of the worst Sith.
And I wish the sequel trilogy had Luke as Maverick. Treated Luke the same way they treated Maverick in this.
Just the question of Luke, what does it take to beat a Sith? Well, it wasn't combat. Although it played a role, combat wasn't what defeated them. It was a spirit. Why didn't we hear Luke pass that on to somebody? You know?
That's right. I'm hearing that music playing.
Yes, sir, I would. Right off the flight deck.
No, do you know when this came out, I was going to the what do you call it? The karaoke bars. And I was playing Danger Zone. And I got thrown out. I requested for Danger Zone to be played 6 times. And they threw me out of the bar.
They like they did Maverick?
Yeah, they told me that I had exceeded my logins attempts.
So wait, you they wouldn't let you do Danger Zone?
That's a joke. You've exceeded your logins attempts. You've exceeded your login attempts.
I missed that part.
I was sending everybody that joke through text message when this movie was coming out. Oh my God. I just got thrown out of a karaoke bar. I told him to do Danger Zone.
My dumbass. I was like, what does logging in have to? I go, did they have a computer at like the bar? Oh man, that is great. Well, and how about just a quick aside? I think it's a big risk looking back to take a sequel that's 36 years old that you want to give it its own identity, right? And open it exactly the same way as the first film. Same music.
Okay, you're right. We should have absolutely talked about that. And we're going back to the beginning, but we absolutely have to talk about that.
Just a quick aside.
But I freaking love it.
Me too.
I freaking love it. And it played so well based on what we had talked about before when you had just seen Tom Cruise talk about how much he wanted this to mean to the fans.
Great point.
And then you went in the theater, which actually I was watching on Apple TV, which it did not have. It might have a Tom Cruise intro as a special feature or something like that, but it didn't have it as just part of the film. Right. But I remember watching him say that, and then immediately after that, it goes exactly into that, and you go into that. And so that also, to me, reinforced exactly what he was saying, that they understand what this is, because it is a ballsy move to try to recreate that scene. But I freaking loved that scene. I watched that movie. Like, I watched that scene. That's one of the scenes that I will turn on. You're talking about turning on Star. When I'm like doing nothing else at night and I'm like, I need something else that's dark in the house, I will turn on the original Top Gun scene. I mean, that's what it means to me, because I think it's fantastic. So it is a seriously ballsy move to say we're going to recreate that, except for it totally worked.
It totally worked
because you had the Tom Cruise talking about that and you believed him, and then when that music started you were not thinking that this is just nostalgia bait,
Right.
that this is in fact they are trying to show you that they care, and
I would
it
actually
worked so well.
I'm starting to think about this. The first time I thought this, but the difference between nostalgia bait and good thematic continuity is what's underneath the hood. If you're just doing it to incite nostalgia, that's a weak effort. If you're doing it and you can back it up through the whole story, because you've captured the spirit of the characters and the story and the themes, it's not nostalgia bait. It is part of the theme and it's part of the lore of the story.
And this was telling you that we are serious.
Yeah, this is the music that goes with Top Gun.
Serious in a major way.
And by the way, what's funny is, Danger Zone became almost a hokey song at some point by the late 80s and everything, associated with the old time. Now that this movie's come out, it's funny because my kids love Danger Zone. Sometimes I'll be like, what do you guys want to hear? And I'll be going through a playlist and Lucas or my other son, Jacob, will be like, play Danger Zone. And I'll put it on and I'm driving in my Jeep and I'm like, I'm playing Danger Zone. I'm blasting Danger Zone in my car. Oh, real quick, I wanted to mention something. I promised my 8-year-old son I would do this.
Okay, go ahead.
He just got a gift. Just complete coincidence.
Okay.
He's not done with it, but it's the Maverick F-18. It's not Lego. This is called Kobe. But it's like Lego because they didn't have a Top Gun for Legos, but they have a little Maverick guy and a little rooster guy. It's really cool. I'll show you next week when it's all done, but he's about 30% done here.
Oh,
that's the F-18 that Maverick flies in Maverick.
Oh, cool.
So I said I would mention it on here because it was just it's funny. He's literally building it over there. And I'm like, yeah, I'm talking about Top Gun Maverick tonight.
See, that also goes back to the whole idea of aging. And that's why I think that this film, you could talk about this film and its themes and Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, very similarly.
Yes.
They handle some things differently, but the themes are definitely there.
Including the title Captain.
Yeah, well, yeah, even that. Yes. But it's not, both of those movies don't shy away from, we have been through how long? I don't remember exactly the number of years, but the number of years it had been before you had seen, from Captain Kirk on and Spock and all of the crew from the original series to, the original movie, but then especially Star Trek 2,
right.
What is this? What is their relationship? That again, they don't shy away from that between Star Trek and Star Trek, the original series and Star Trek 2. They don't shy away from that with Star Trek and Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick. They don't shy away
at all.
They instead incorporate it because they also understand their audience, that their audience is also dealing with that.
Right.
And it would suck to say that it would suck if the message was that you suck then.
Well, and what's weird is, we saw Top Gun back in 1986. And it's funny because I tell my kids, I was like, that weird plane he called a museum piece at the end of the movie? That was state of the art in 1986. These were state of the art planes. So when Top Gun came out, it was almost like the US was showing off its new fighter jets, its new generation of fighter jets. And what's weird is that's all I remembered, Top Gun, the cutting edge fighter jets. So here it is 36 years later. I'm in the theater. And now that jet's a museum piece, and they're flying these other ones, and the bullets are a little bit more intense. The countermeasures are more intense. The missiles fling out faster. It's more maneuverable. So suddenly, it's almost like I caught up with naval aviation in a way. Even though I knew that there have been more planes, it's like suddenly it's like here's the Top Gun movie showcasing the new cutting edge planes, and it's like the ones from the 80s. That's 30 years ago. We don't even use those planes. We sell them off to like third world countries,
Yeah, I don't know if this is the place to talk about that, but probably about this. But it reminds me, a couple of years ago, I took my my second oldest nephew to space camp.
Oh,
because I always wanted to go to space camp as a kid.
Totally.
I wanted to go to space camp. I want to go to space camp so badly, but I never got to. But then they have well, they call it parent-child, but it doesn't have to, because I'm not the parent.
Like guardian child.
But yeah, like adult child space camp. And so I was like, okay, we're going. So we totally went. But, there were things about it that I was just not cool with.
Oh, really?
like when we went into the simulator for the space shuttle, like that's supposed to be the big thing, right? The space shuttle simulator.
Yeah.
It was extremely apparent to me that we were sitting in a simulator for a 1970s craft.
Oh, really?
Because like one of the things that they said is the shuttle cannot have a keyboard. So you're going to have to enter your commands into the shuttle using this really esoteric, weird looking thing.
Like a joystick?
Well, it was like, instead of like just a keyboard that's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and all this stuff like that, it was like F1, A3, 4, 7. And I was like, my nephew does not understand why a spacecraft cannot have a keyboard. Like, they would understand in the 1970s why it would be too complicated for the spacecraft to have a keyboard. But today, you would just have a keyboard. So what? Like, so I was very aware that I was like in a 1970s spacecraft simulator and not like something you're supposed to be in awe of today.
High tech.
Yeah, it was weird.
Wow.
So man, it was weird. But they bring that forward to tie that into Maverick. They talk about those themes, which is important because we're right at the cusp of that, because Maverick was able to say, we're about to head to full automation, but there are things that we can do as a pilot that you can't do. And that was the big theme of that. That was also a major theme of this movie.
Yeah, they call Admiral Kane the Drone Ranger.
The Drone Ranger, right.
And I've actually read some military books, and they refer to it as the chair force instead of the Air Force. Guys that pilot the drones. But yeah, there's that great line. Hey, Maverick, as he's leaving, the time of your kind is through. And he's like, maybe so, sir, but not today. What a great line, because it's not you're not being a Luddite. You're not rejecting the future of technology, but you're like, but it's not here now, and I'm still here. So until that day comes, I'm going to do what I do.
And that's a very Captain Kirk kind of thing.
Yeah, it is. You're totally right. Yeah, they refer to Kirk in the same sort of he who broke the rules, whatever it suited him.
that he's about to be replaced by technology, but Kirk's like, well, not really, not.
Yeah, well, but there's I think both Star Trek and Maverick suggest that there may always be a place for guys like this. That you can't quite automate human daring, the when and the why and the how. That there is something about it. I've watched a lot of, even recently, I watched a World War II documentary, and they were talking about a giant fleet battle with Japan. I forget the one it was. I want to say leading up to Saipan, but I could be wrong. Anyway, the Japanese had the superior fleet. They had one of their massive aircraft carriers, which were pretty dangerous at the time. And they were encountering the U.S. fleet near these islands, and the U.S. fleet was overmatched. But the Japanese didn't know that. And one rogue captain of a destroyer charged ahead, charged the entire Japanese fleet. The Japanese admiral didn't know what to make of it, thought it was some sort of a feint, and pulled his whole fleet back. And while doing that, the real U.S. fleet made it in on time. And I thought to myself, there it is right there, the American Buckaroo. There's that Maverick that we're told is part of an American archetype. Captain Kirk, Pete Mitchell, Maverick, the Doc Holliday. I mean, all these guys.
Yeah.
That Buckaroo Banzai. This is an American archetype, and you see that it has context in real world situations where someone goes off the script and it throws off the enemy because it's hard to make of it. And I don't know if that is something that's easily programmable or captured properly with AI. So anyway, it is interesting that you said that does play into the theme of aging, the idea that pilots themselves, are poised for total replacement according to, I think, real life. I think there's a real case for that. You would never lose a pilot if they're all drone or remote controlled airplanes. And the movie definitely discusses that.
It deals with that. And yeah, it definitely deals with that.
Mm-hmm.
This movie, as we move on through it, it deals like a very classic kind of thing with moving up the timeline, because it says, it gives us that. That's a very classic way to do that. Here it gives you from the very beginning a timeline for when we need to do this, and then it gives you reasons to advance that timeline. Time is a very important part of that.
Yes, and I want to talk about that.
Okay.
I had a question for you though.
Okay.
It's not. I can't say it's a criticism because I love the movie and I love how it all plays out. But the music choices in this movie,
I don't know about.
They all work. It's like Slow Ride, Won't Get Fooled Again. Shoot, what's the other one?
Well, Great Balls of Fire is the one.
Great Balls of Fire, but that's a carryover. And then Bang a Gong, Bang a Gong, Get It On. It's all boomer music. And I thought to myself, I'm like, this movie came out in 1986. This is a Gen X movie. How come they're not using Gen X music or like 90s music or even 80s music? Why would they go with like 60s, 70s music? I'm not saying, again, I don't want to criticize it because I think all the music works. I just have this weird, why? Why would they go with baby boomer rock and roll in a movie that's really Gen X?
I don't know.
Like poster child type of movie. In fact, the Won't Get Fooled Again sequence, where I think you mentioned it earlier, like Maverick is shown, he shows up the students. He is able to best them. And that's all done through the montage with the Who's Won't Get Fooled Again, which is like, that makes me think of my dad. My dad loves that music. He's a big the Who fan. And that was one of his favorite songs. So when I hear that music come on, I think immediately of my dad and his generation. And it's a great montage, boom, that's a kill. Maverick knocks them all out and they all have to do the push-ups. So I was just curious, like, what did that catch you at all, or did you think about that, or was that a non-issue?
No, that's not something that I thought about. It's not something that I thought about. I wonder if people post in the comments here. The music was not something that had.
It was 60s, 70s rock and roll in a genre of film that came out in 1986. Gen X total movie. It's a Gen X movie.
But would it have been what you were? Actually, James just brings that up.
That's actually
so if you're younger and you're watching Top Gun for the first time, what music are you listening to? Are you listening? Gen X grew up on their parents' music. It was
I think James is right in that.
That's it.
So, for example, when I was a kid, I didn't choose the music. I didn't tell my dad, who's driving the car, hey, put on one of mine. No. He had the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, the Doors, the Who, the Moody Blues. And if there was and he was either air drums or air guitar, he was pounding his hand on the dashboard to do the synthesizer for Ray Manzarek and Light My Fire. It was my dad's world in there. So I grew up listening to all that music. Like my kids, they have their own music. Like sometimes we're driving around and we take turns picking the songs. Like I'll pick my song and I'll put it on a Nirvana or Smashing Pumpkins. But my kids have their own stuff.
James.
Yeah. So I was, I was 10 years. I was born in 76. So I was 10 years old, which is my son's age now. I was 10 years old in 86. So yeah, I certainly grew up listening to my parents' music. There's no doubt about that. So James's comment rings true to me. I guess what I'm saying is over time, though, 1986, now we're in 2023. I just associate Top Gun with Gen X, like peak 80s bravado. So I just thought, for some reason, I'm always scratching my head on their music choices, even though I love the music in the movie. Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah. James understands exactly what growing up with baby boomer parent.
James says I'm 79. James says I'm 79.
Yeah. Well, born in 79.
Yeah. Yeah. Born. That's what I figured it was.
They definitely don't make music like that. I have a theory that they actually got away from computerized music for about 4 years in the mid 90s. And that's the grunge alternative rock and roll era that I absolutely love. But it didn't last long. But I loved it. It was almost like old school rock and roll for about 4 years. But anyway, the music works in this film. Slow Ride was actually used in context in the film to describe Rooster, who is the one who's scared to take risks. He's the anti-Maverick, you could say, the conservative, play it safe type. And by the way, we should probably take a few seconds. I thought Miles Teller was absolutely outstanding in this film.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yes.
He looked like Rooster, which gives his character a massive boost. And his stock was pretty high when this came out. Have you seen The Offer?
I have not. No.
It's a TV series about the making of The Godfather, by the way.
Oh.
And Miles Teller plays, and it's all based on true stories. Miles Teller plays the producer, Al Ruddy. And he was really good in that. And that came out the same time this came out. And I just thought he was fantastic in Maverick.
Well, Steel Mongoose just said, I think that using somewhat anachronistic music makes sense after Maverick himself has been described as an anachronism.
That
could be it. That could be it. That's also very Captain Kirk kind of thing. I mean,
yeah,
you're dealing with issues of aging.
Well, you could probably make the case that Maverick himself is baby boomer age, right? Just based on Tom Cruise's age. So if I was 10 in 1986 and he was 18, he might be late baby boomer material. Maybe. I don't know. Let's see. 1969, I think, is when they start Gen X.
Tom Cruise, it says that Google says was born in 1962.
So he would be a baby boomer late, because I think Gen X starts in 1969. Being born, I've heard that Gen X is basically 1969 to 1980 or 1981 birth years for Gen X. The Offer is on Paramount Plus, and it's great, by the way. It's great. Miles Teller is in it. John Goodman, who was, if you like the movie The Watchmen, the original one from 2008 or 2009, he played the corporate guy, the villain of the movie. Anyway, he has one of his best acting performances in it. As a TV series, it's unbelievable. But it came out the same year as Top Gun Maverick, and so Miles Teller is in both, and I was just able to really appreciate him. I liked him in the movie Whiplash with the drummer. If you haven't seen that, you got to see that. That's amazing. What is that?
No, Ozzy Man, isn't that the bad guy in the
Watchmen?
Watchmen, yes.
Yeah. He plays the ultimate villain of that, who's one of the superheroes, like the successful corporate guy, and he kind of goes bad. He plays this Hollywood producer, and it's one of I think it was an incredible acting performance. So anyway, not to get too far off track, I just want to say that I think Miles Teller brought an awful lot of weight into Top Gun Maverick. It wasn't carried by Tom Cruise alone. I think Miles Teller really pulled his weight in this and really gave us a convincing son of Goose, who carries, in terms of like a sequel, a theme from the first film, brings it into this one and ups the ante with him blaming Maverick for his father's death.
And also, I mean, there was a lot there, and also delaying his admission to the Navy.
I thought about that from a writing structure standpoint. I think it was originally done to age him properly with Maverick so that he could still be in Top Gun in 2020. So I think that they're like, man, we're off by about 4 years. You know, he's a little too old to be in Top Gun. So I think the writer, this is a guess only, I have a feeling the writer's like, what if Maverick pulled his papers, held him back 4 years, and that's why he's so old coming into this level now? That's just a theory, but I think that was a writer's.
Could be.
I think the writer was being smart on how to delay, age-wise, 36 years later, why Goose's son, who was alive in Top Gun as a kid, why he would be this old in Top Gun. That was just my theory.
Well, that could be, and if that was true, it was actually thinking about it now, that might absolutely be true. That's a good reason. That's trying to come up with a reason fitting in, and it amplifies what's already going on.
Yeah, so there's an example of a writer taking what would be a flaw and turning it into a major plot device, because Maverick pulling his papers, and I looked it up. I was like, what does that mean? It means that when he applied for the Navy, Maverick pulled his application so he couldn't get accepted into the Navy. I even went onto a board that was discussing pulling papers, and there's a couple Navy guys posting in there, and they were like, this wouldn't happen in reality because obviously he reapplied and Maverick didn't pull him again. And they also said that because one of the guys even said that because Goose is someone who died on duty or in service, that his son would be automatically considered if he was actually a military man.
Oh, no.
So I guess technically Maverick wouldn't be able to pull his papers.
Well, I did think about that, because if it's pulled, what does that mean? That you can't reapply for another 4 years?
They didn't explain that, if so.
Well, but that's kind of what it was implied in the movie, that, well, okay, I applied, I got my papers pulled, so you can't apply next year.
Exactly.
That means you're 4 years behind. So there is a little bit of,
doesn't workness.
yeah, or a little bit of wishy-washiness or whatever is going on there, because I did kind of wonder that.
Yeah. One thing I will say that I really appreciated, remember how we talked in Star Trek II that the writers introduced naval culture strongly into Star Trek, and it really revitalized Starfleet? One thing I really appreciated in Top Gun Maverick was the scene where him and Penny are on a sailboat sailing. And she even says, "You're in the Navy now," because he's in the Navy, but he's an Air Force pilot, or he's a Navy pilot.
He's a naval pilot. He is a naval aviator.
A naval aviator. That's right. But here he is manning the sails of what looks to be a very difficult sailing outing, by the way, on pretty choppy waters. I just appreciated it, showing us Maverick as sailor for this one little.
Or his incompetence as naval as Maverick is. I actually wondered. I'm gonna grab another drink here. But I actually wondered when I was watching that scene. I was wondering if they were intentionally kind of making a callback and or making fun of A Few Good Men.
Oh, really?
Because A Few Good Men, which is another movie that I love, but in A Few Good Men, Tom Cruise is playing a naval officer.
Correct.
And he's and they're dealing with the Navy protocols and the judge advocate generals. And then also, but in that movie, at some point, they also say, like, Demi Moore's character says something like, "Jesus Christ, McAfee, you're in the Navy." Because when they're like trying to cross a boat or something like that, but he's like, "Oh my God, that's not, but I don't go in a boat," or something like that. And so I'm not sure, but it recalls that movie to me. Another movie where Tom Cruise is in the Navy, but he doesn't like to go on boats.
They draw attention to the fact that he's not a sailor. Yeah. That's funny. I had not thought of that.
Yeah.
Now that you say
it, the Jag, right? Yeah, I love that movie too. Maybe we should talk about the movie someday.
Jag,
too.
yeah. Oh yeah, man.
A Few Good Men. But I just remember that. Jesus Christ, McAfee, you're in the, because he's like, "Oh, no boat. Nobody said there'd be a boat. Jesus Christ, you're in the Navy."
See, but that is what I would say. Yeah, that's good. That's a good joke to make about being in the Navy, but not being good with boats or comfortable on boats. I feel like in this movie, though, they didn't use it to make him look bad. They showed that he wasn't knowledgeable, but they also showed that he was a little bit willing to learn and take a few risks at her direction. She's like, do this, grab that thing, pull this up. And he followed it. And she, he basically was the student for that scene, but willing to learn. And like I said, it did not look like they were out on a Sunday cruise. Like that boat was tilted like 45 degrees. It was windy. There was some heavy chop, and that looked like a difficult sailboat outing. And I appreciated it. I appreciated seeing Maverick as sailor for that brief little date he was on.
Attempting to be sailor, yes,
Yeah.
but not really you. I also think about, and this was years ago, but like reading something on Reddit, like when we're studying the different movies and stuff like that on Reddit, and somebody had a problem with the way that their call signs were assigned.
Really?
Yeah, it was like, that's not real. That's not how, like the quote was something, it wasn't exactly this, I'm sure, but it was very close to this. Something about that you don't choose your own call sign. Your call signs are assigned to you by your and he was like, so the way that Top Gun shows that's not even how that would ever happen in the Air Force. And then the next response is, well, it's a good thing they're not in the Air Force, dumbass. They're all in the Navy.
Yeah. What's funny is I remember being on an airplane one time, a commercial plane, and we were coming in to land, and the people behind me were talking. They had this it was a husband and a wife. They were an older couple, and they were like, do you think the pilot's a naval pilot or an Air Force pilot? And they're like, well, we'll find out when he lands. And I was like, listening in, I was like, what the hell? And this guy comes in. And so now I'm like, what the hell? How can you tip off if you're a naval pilot or Air Force pilot based on how you land a commercial craft? And apparently the answer is the naval pilots drop because they're used to a very short runway on an aircraft carrier. Whereas the Air Force pilots come in nice, long, smooth, slow descent. So if there's a drop, then that's a cue that the pilot may have once been a naval pilot versus an Air Force pilot. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I would never have thought of even noticing that. But,
I think about that because I had a friend who was a naval aviator.
Oh,
and he talked about, like, we were saying, like the differences, like there was apparently just a constant running joke between them. Oh, Sable Phoenix says that's true enough. In the military aviation, your call sign is given to you by the other pilots.
The other pilots
itself, right? But I remember that apparently it is just a running joke between naval aviators and Air Force pilots about the way that they do things, that the way they approach things apparently is completely different, and that like their philosophies are completely different. Apparently there is military culture that is just completely different about that. And because my friend who was in the Navy, and he was like, you gotta part of so I remember, I'm not sure, I'm not declaring I have all the details right or something like that, but that you got to fly from here and then go over there in order to actually in order to qualify for something like that. You got to fly over here and then fly over there. And the difference between the naval approach to that and the Air Force approach to that. And he was like, at one point, he was saying they was had Air Force guys walking by who just would not accept anything that goes on in the Navy. The Navy just will accept, when he was like, at some point, I had to get this plane home. And he said, I had my boot out and I was beating something on my plane with my boot. Okay, I gotta get this thing started because I got to get home, in order to get my wings or something as I get this plane back. And he was like, I was walking by and there were Air Force pilots looking at me as I was beating my plane with my boot in order to get it started. So apparently there is some type of cultural difference between, you don't want to call a naval aviator a pilot. Because
I picked that up listening to you.
Naval aviators. That's a different thing than being a pilot in the Air Force. That's a different thing.
Well, what's funny is somewhere on YouTube right now, there's a couple of Air Force pilots talking about some naval aviator who was banging on his plane with his boots, going, "This crazy guy."
that's no, probably so. James says the Air Force has a reputation for one, being elitist, and two, being lazy.
Uh-oh.
This is among other branches. See, my grandfather was in the Air Force.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my grandfather. But see, what was interesting, because they were like, I spoke with my grandfather on these subjects more than a lot of other people in my family, because when he found his papers, of course, his papers were a commission in the U.S. Army.
Oh,
Because that was before the U.S. Air Force was actually a separate branch of service. So he was in the Army because there was no U.S. Air Force. But when you talk to him, he always said I was in the Air Force, because he was in the U.S. Army Air Corps. But he just always said I was in the Air Force. Like, I never heard him say that he was in the Army. Never. But then, like, later we like found his papers, and it says like commissioned in the U.S. Army, and some people were like, "What the crap? U.S. Army? What is he talking about? He was in the Air Force." Yeah, but it's because it was the U.S. Air Corps, and he was just always in that.
Yeah, it is interesting seeing all the kind of nuances and even rivalries amongst the different branches. And there's a big one between the Navy aviators and the Air Force pilots. I have known that.
James says, I was Army. I always said before I aged out that if I re-enlisted, I would go. Were you ever in the military?
I was not.
You were not? I was not either.
I almost joined. I was going to join the Marines, actually, and my mom had. So this was 1994, and I was going to go into the Marines, and my mom had a Vietnam veteran. Basically, we went out to some lake, and we were hanging out in some gazebo, and she left, and this guy was just talking to me about. He's like, "You don't want to join the military." Like, he gave me a full court press, and I hate to admit it, but he kind of got in my. He's like, they have to feed you 3 squares. He's like, they don't, but he goes, we would do this thing. I forgot what he called it, where you would go through the cafeteria line. They'd give you the food, and you'd get to the end of the line. You dump out the food and go out and do your drill, so that they could say they served you the food if you were running. So he told me all these terrible stories, and I ended up changing my mind. And he just said, he's like, it's not what you think it is. He's like, they show you adventure and all this stuff. Anyway, I balked. I ended up just getting a job and going my own way. But I was going to, and I've always wondered what my life would have been, because I was the kind of guy that needed some discipline in 1994. I think it would have done me some good.
Well, I am not either, and so that's the same thing that everybody says. Well, I almost did, but I didn't. But I think about the same thing, but it was a bit different from what you said, though, because my grandfather taught me most about that, because the grandfather who was in the U.S. Air Corps, U.S. Army Air Corps, and the U.S. Air Corps, he and I were very close, but he told me that you don't have to join the military. But that if you don't, you're going to miss out on an entire side of life.
I believe it.
But he was World War II and Korea. He served through World War II and Korea. So that was his era. Yeah, he was like, you don't have to join the military. But like, his perspective on what it's like to be in the military was World War II and Korea. And so let's see. Oh, wait, what do you got right here? I'll come back to that later. So I always thought about that. Like, when I would say he never encouraged me to join the military. He just always said that like, here are my stories from being in World War II in Korea. And he never glamorized it, because he was also like, as soon as I get out, I was like, I'm out of here. I'm doing something else.
Well, and see, I was around a lot of Vietnam veterans, so they were very thumbs down. My mom dated a guy who was a Green Beret in Vietnam, and he would tell. He was the kind of guy that if there was a loud popping sound, he would jump. First time I'd ever witnessed that, by the way, if there was a pop, this guy it scared him. He still was conditioned to react. But he had some bad stories too. He would say, he would tell me stories about unloading an entire clip into a jungle at some and missing he's like, in the movies, they make it look like when you shoot, you hit. He's like, 99% of the time you are shooting and hitting nothing. So anyway, like I grew up around a lot of the Vietnam veteran guys. So there was definitely more of a sour, and in the 80s, I would say the impression of the American military was, you had G.I. Joe, and there was kind of a heroic side to it, but there was definitely the Vietnam era in a lot of our movies, by the way. A lot of our movies were very anti-Vietnam, and that didn't really get turned around until Desert Storm, the early 90s, like 1990, 1991, where there was this positive, like almost like a universally positive sense of the American military. But when I was growing up, that was not the case. I think there was more of a negative, bad taste in our collective mouths over Vietnam, and that made me rethink joining.
Well, there's actually a lot we can say about
sure.
that, but let me say this, because this has made me think about my grandfather's perspective. Now, the grandfather who was in World War II and then the Korean War, that's my mother's father. I had my father's father was also in the Air Force, actually, when they actually was in the Air Force, and it wasn't the Army Air Corps.
Not the Air Corps.
So he also joined the Air Force later, but that he was a little bit younger, so I got an age differential there. But he said his closest to combat was the Bay of Pigs, when the Bay of Pigs was going on. That he would have been. So he's a little bit younger.
1962.
Right. Yeah. But where was I going with that? Where I was going with that was that the perspective on the U.S. military and whether or not you can make fun of it, or what its status is. And I haven't thought about this in great detail, but I think it would be an interesting perspective from a story analysis perspective, is that people are saying, like, okay, today, like, or even let's say 20 years ago, is the U.S. military an irreproachable, like, force of good? But that when everybody was in it, like if you were World War II era or you were drafted, like if everybody encounters it, if nobody's because comparatively today, in today's world, very few people encounter being in the military. It's not something that most people actually have experience with. Right. I'm different. I'm here in the South. Well, you're in Texas.
Well, you're in Alabama. Yeah. There's some military. Austin's not very militarized, but like San Antonio has an air base.
See, that's another subject.
Fort Hood.
Like here in Alabama, I believe that it's the case that even as late as Desert Storm, we received the highest casualty rating of any state.
Yikes.
That we here in Alabama are very familiar with, like, are very attached, like on a personal level, to military individuals. Right. In a way that if you go to New Jersey, they are not.
Yes, I know what you mean.
So we understand that, like, when you're talking about casualties taken in the Iraq War, that's like people here in Alabama that we know.
Versus just the military guys out there.
Yeah. But that was the perspective. So to go back to what I was trying to say in a broader sense, that was when they were telling stories like I Dream of Jeannie. They were telling stories about in an environment where everyone had experience with the U.S. military.
So I see what you're saying. Yeah, it was more of a
make fun of it because you realized it was, there were bad officers, there were this, you realized what it was like to deal with the U.S. military.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, it was much more pervasive in society. In fact, and I'll say this: I don't think the U.S. military is beyond reproach. However, I would say for the most part, a strong supporter of the U.S. military. I have read countless books. So I'm a weird guy. I keep track of everything. As you remember me with my Dark Knight stuff, I have all these Excel spreadsheets. I keep track of all the books I read. My number one category is historical fiction. My number two category is military nonfiction. My third category is economics. And then after that, fantasy fiction, high fantasy fiction. So I have read a ton of books about the U.S. military, and I have nothing but the highest respect for the people who serve for our country. I don't think most of us, like you said, really appreciate what the heck they're doing out there and how difficult it is and how we're over here having a good time and they're serving overseas or up against some terrible stuff. I read a lot of books even about the Iraq war and Afghanistan and some of the recent stuff and the heroics that you don't even hear about. So anyway, I guess I just wanted to say, like, some of these movies take place with a military backdrop, like Top Gun Maverick, or even in the fantasy setting like Star Trek with Starfleet. And I just don't think that should be overlooked. I think that's an important cross section. I think there is something archetypal about military service within a culture. I think every culture has it. And the American military is one of the largest fighting forces in history. So it's quite something to tell stories about what it means to be a part of the American Navy or Army or any of the other branches out there. Thin Red Line. I actually studied that movie.
I was going to say that too. I was going to go up to a couple others, but yeah, James
I went through a phase where while studying movies, I freeze framed something in the movie that meant something that I took notes on. And Disillusionment, which we talked about. Remember we talked about Disillusionment last week? Or was it 2 weeks ago? Disillusionment was a big thing. And Jim Caviezel's character in that has one of the greatest disillusionment moments like ever. He thinks he's indestructible, like he's super lucky. And he always gets away with it. Whatever he does, he's that Maverick type of character. And he always gets away with it. And he's frustrating to his superiors. And there's this moment where he's leading the Japanese away from his platoon. And he just expects to get away with it. And he comes out to this clearing where the Japanese army is surrounding him. And he doesn't get away with it this time. And the look on his face, and the camera comes right up into him. And it captures a character's arc from that. To me, it captured the disillusionment moment excellent in an excellent way.
I agree.
It's star-studded. And it's very slow moving. It's kind of cerebral. But it's a great movie. And the soundtrack is great.
We Were Soldiers. I need to watch that. I need to watch both of these movies again because James Bacon had brought up Thin Red Line. I need to watch that again. It's been a long time, but then also We Were Soldiers.
I haven't seen that in a long time. I don't remember We Were Soldiers. That's with Mel Gibson, right?
Yeah, that was Mel Gibson's.
Wait,
yeah.
Is that the one? I think it showed them. Is that the movie that showed them conceiving the idea of using helicopters for a jungle war? And they show them practicing in like North Carolina.
Oh, I don't. Well, it's been. I don't know. It could be. It's been a long time since I've seen it.
I think that was We Were Soldiers. I really appreciated that. The idea of the conception of, hey, we have this new idea. We're thinking about using helicopters for rapid deployment if there was ever a conflict in Southeast Asia, and we want you to head it up. And they show them practicing like jungle warfare in North Carolina. It's hopelessly not good practice grounds for actual South Asian jungles, but it was interesting to see the idea of the conception of this helicopter.
That might be. I need to go watch. I need to go back and watch both of those because those were great. I remember. I want to say We Were Soldiers was coming out at about the same time that my brother was joining the army to go to potentially Afghanistan.
Well, you know what's interesting is my son is about to turn 11. And, there's always a question of which movies do you show him? And I'm wanting to show him Black Hawk Down because that happened when I was.
Oh, my God. We've got to talk about that movie. I freaking love that movie.
Have you do me a favor, read the book because the book complements the movie and is awesome. Mark Bowden. I've been wanting to show my son because I was like, I was in high school when this happened, like when I was thinking about joining 1993, 1994. So anyway, it's so well done and it just captures a modern urban warfare setting just so well. But just to get back to Top Gun Maverick and part of what we're talking about in terms of a military story that Top Gun Maverick does well. And we talked about this even with Star Wars. We're about 48 minutes into the movie. We've introduced everything, all the characters. We've established Maverick is excellent. We've established the conflicts. At 48 minutes in, we get a very serious and sober tactical rundown of what the pilots are expected to do. Because if you think about it, before then, they told Maverick the tactical issue, and then we spend most of the movie up until that point, Maverick doing target practice and maneuvers, and it's just dogfighting. It's fun dogfighting practice, almost to the point where you forget the mission. 48 minutes in, they get back to the mission, and they give you the tactical dry run. And what I have to say, and I've noted this multiple times as essential if you're going to deal with any sort of large-scale confrontation, let the audience know tactically what is going on. And what I mean by tactical is the physical reality that the characters are going to be facing. Modern movies do not do this and are almost tactically inept. In my, like, if I don't know if you saw Obi-Wan Kenobi, they have like,
I stopped watching it.
It's terrible. They have scenes where I don't even want to get into the details, but an aerial bombardment would solve the problem. They don't do an aerial bombardment, and they do like what the way everyone's behaving shows zero sense of tactical reality. So here, Maverick does this. He says, this is the terrain. This is how fast you're going to have to go. Here's where the SAMs are, the surface to air missiles are stationed. Here's the planes on patrol that we have to evade because they're next gen. They'll shoot you down. You have to come up. Like, he goes through all of it. And the first part is just the canyon run, navigating the canyon at high speeds below the hard deck so that you don't activate the surface to air missiles. And I just want to say I appreciate that, because not only is it good storytelling because now we understand the stakes clearly, this movie and I think this is part of what makes the movie successful, takes the time to show you multiple efforts by two-man team pilots, two wings, failing to make this run in a practice setting. No one can do it. And I think that's yes. Lot of
we
people,
need to talk about that in a moment.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Finish your thought.
Yeah, well, I was just saying, like, so they tell us what the issue is. Here's the problem. Here's how fast you're going to go. They make it very clear cut. And then they bring in the character flaws. Hangman always leaves his guy. You know, he did it, but his wingman couldn't. Rooster always goes slow. So he finished the trench run, the canyon run, a minute slow, but he was the only one to make it to the target. So now you're getting character flaws mixed into this tactical issue. And I think this is a great example of why tactical reality is so important. Anyone who plays role-playing, like Dungeons and Dragons, has to have command of the tactical reality, because the tactical reality limits what the characters can do. And then the characters themselves have to come up with the plan and then the ability to pull it off. And that creates problem and conflict and tension by itself, enough to sustain a movie, a $1.5 billion movie. Just the tactical reality and the efforts to try to tack it, and then the character limitations that come along with it, the people who are trying to execute the tactics, their shortcomings. All of that plays a role. And then the interpersonal conflicts.
Well, so we could talk about when people, like when Sable thinks saying, is that a critique that actually this movie replays the Death Star trench run? Is that a problem? It does. And you can totally critique this movie from the standpoint of, does this make the sense in reality? But we typically don't critique that perspective here on this channel. We can, because sometimes we do. We're talking about the difference between the physical reality and the underlying story that's going on.
Right.
But okay, we have the underlying story here. The underlying story works. Although, yes, on the physical level, we are kind of rerunning the Death Star here. But it's working on a physical, it's working on a spiritual level. That this is what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to deal with this situation. So it works. So it doesn't bother me.
Right. It doesn't bother me at all. My thing, every time people want to argue with me, and by the way, I don't mind arguing. I should say debating. Like, I don't think everyone has to share my opinions. I'm not mean to people who disagree with me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I respect that there are people who love The Last Jedi. I don't, but I respect that people have a different thing. But my final closing argument with any issue is, did it work? Did it stand the test of time? And usually that is the differentiator for me. And in Top Gun Maverick, yes, it's beat for beat. There's a trench run. I think I saw James Bacon mention it. The targeting computer didn't work. He has to rely on his. He almost has to use the force. There's the dogfight at the end.
Hadn't seen this? Watch it, James.
I have
Watch
not.
it, James.
Oh my God! Yeah, you got to. You have to. You have to see it. However, it worked. So at the end of the day, you can complain about it. You could say it was bad. You could say it's a ripoff. But I don't think it comes across as a ripoff. I think Top Gun Maverick's portrayal of with the characters and the tactical issue that they're facing as naval aviators stands on its own. I think it did enough to be distinguished and kind of its own in-themed, different. Like, it's Top Gun. I feel like I'm watching Top Gun more than rehash of Star Wars.
Oh, right, yeah.
So at the end of the day, I think it worked.
Yeah, I think it did too. I will personally, I will take it. So that's not something that I'm, being a big critique on. I understand that. Oh, you just reran Star Wars. Well, Star Wars worked,
and so did this one.
And we need something, and so did this one. So it works. So okay,
right.
So I'll go with it. The phrase also, well, I'm going anyway. When Maverick is going to show them that this can in fact work.
Oh
yeah, like, we don't have a exercise scheduled for you today, sir, or something like that. And he says, "Well, I'm going anyway." Wait, what's the name of that? That's the same line that what's his name? Oh my God, what's his name? Uses in what's his movie? Oh my God.
I need more.
Yeah, it's hold on, I'm gonna give you more. Well, I'm going anyway. I love that line. Because that line repeats itself in several movies. Something. Well, I'm going anyway. Oh, someone help me in the chat. Glenn Ross.
Oh, yeah. With Alec Baldwin?
Yes. Alex Baldwin delivers that exact same line in Glenn Ross. And I love that movie, Glenn Ross. Maybe we should talk about that sometime as well.
That's a good one.
But that's a really good movie. And Alex Baldwin's character delivers that same line, well, I'm going anyway. And I wonder if that was deliberate.
It might be.
Because it could be, because it just seems like now that, especially as this has been retread twice, that it's a important part of a movie when something's going wrong and the character says, well, I'm going anyway.
Han Solo says it in Empire Strikes Back. Well, he's like, it's your tauntaunal free. He's like, that's right. My friend is out in it. I'm going anyway.
Okay. That's not an exact replication of the line.
Right. It's not exact.
Okay. It's the same theme though.
Same theme. Right.
Something. Well, I'm going anyway. Coffee is for closers. Glenn Ross. Yes. Okay.
So I like what you're saying, that there's something about just the concept of you can't go. And the follow-up is, well, I'm going anyway.
I'm going anyway. Because that was when not everybody is there for Alec Baldwin's monologue. Where's this guy? I don't know where he is. I'm going anyway. I want to be conscious of when I use those terms, that words. When he says, well, I'm going anyway. Because that's here when Maverick comes in and says, well, we don't have anything scheduled for you today, sir. Well, I'm going anyway.
You know what?
That's a powerful line.
It's a powerful line. And I actually that's a little ahead. I wanted to talk one.
Okay, go
There's
ahead.
one sequence we should get to before that.
Okay.
And it's such a good sequence.
Okay.
Before that scene, there's a scene with him and Iceman with Val Kilmer.
Okay.
And if you want to talk about a franchise that respects its character respects its lore, reintroduces the characters, and then hits you in the heart. This movie does it right. They bring, because when I rewatched Top Gun 1986, I noticed that Maverick was an antagonist in a way to Pete Mitchell. He was the rival, or at the very least, a rival pilot or aviator in Top Gun.
But it's say that again. Wait, hold on.
That Iceman was in the Top Gun 1986 film was the chief rival for Maverick.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
But if you listen to his character, he's not a dumb jock rival. He's not a bully. He even has the, you know what your problem is moment.
He has that moment. Yes.
He has that moment.
Yes. Yes.
And
does.
he's very wise in Top Gun 1986. He gives Maverick good advice. He tells him, he even says, you're dangerous. That's why we can't rely on you. He's not saying it to be a bully. He's saying because you're a Maverick, because you're unpredictable, you're dangerous, and it threatens the rest of us. That's a reasonable position to take. That's correct.
He even is humanized when Goose dies. Like
Totally.
He comes up and he tries to provide.
We all liked him. Yeah,
we all liked him. He tries to provide. He tries to make that bridge.
I agree. I think that Iceman in 1986 Top Gun came across as almost an older brother style of rival, someone who seems to know something a little bit more like you. I think Lou would call this the relationship character.
Probably would. We should talk to him about that when he comes back.
Yes, someone who knows a little bit more than you, who's willing to post you up. That's why I think Big Brother, because it is confrontational with these two, and yet I think Iceman is wise. And so here we are in 2023, and we're catching up with these characters 36 years later. Iceman is a fleet admiral. He's a big dog in the military structure in the Navy, and Maverick is the captain. I think I mentioned it earlier during the scene. I really did not get a sense that Iceman thought of himself as a superior officer. I felt that when they sat down and talked, the scene came across to me as a man-to-man discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yes, almost independent of the military rank. And I actually have a theory that Val Kilmer brought a lot to that scene, because I noted, they say when someone is blind, their hearing is improved.
Mm-hmm.
Val Kilmer, as an actor, can't talk much. And I noticed how much he was able to communicate in that scene with 1 or 2 word phrases or 2 or 3 word phrases on the computer typed that carried so much.
I love that too. I
yes,
want to talk about work.
There was so much gravity and weight to the discussion, and Val Kilmer, or at least the scene, did it with very little words. Like, I'm a wordy guy. I'm the opposite of Iceman, and he was able to say so much with so little. And to your point right there, there's a scene where he said, let's talk about work. And he's like, yeah. Well, what do you want to talk about? And he's like, yeah, he points. Let's talk about work. So with very little, Iceman is able to have this entire conversation with Maverick. And what's amazing is it's one of the most emotional conversations in the entire film, with one character almost pantomiming his half of the conversation. That's an incredible feat for a visual medium. It's time to let go. When I'm watching the movie, I think we've all had moments in our life or situations in our life where there's something that's really tough that we're carrying with us. And that phrase, it's time to let it go, is one of those phrases that's really tough to accept. And I think this movie just nailed that. This idea that you have to let go. Goose died. It was his friend. It was his best friend. And his best friend died. And Val's like, that's still affecting you as a mentor. It's affecting your attitude toward Rooster. It's affecting your judgment on the mission. For you to solve this mission, it's time to let go. And at one point, they just left the camera on that phrase. And I'm like, man, they're getting a lot and they're doing so little in this scene. And that's an art form to me. when you can have characters do that. And it's Iceman. It's not just a character. It's not just an admiral. It's Iceman. And he's really following the same role that he had in Top Gun 1986. He's confronting Maverick, and he's posting up Maverick, and he is doing it from a place, I would say, of wisdom. And then, of course, there's the great...
He did grow up. To return to that theme, Iceman is the one who did grow up.
Yes, actually.
So he can impart that wisdom.
Yes, I think that... Yes, I think Iceman comes across as the kid who grew up. But like the older brother, he always knows just a little bit more than you. You know, the older brother does just a little bit more. And he's done this one thing, and he has this nugget for you. And I really liked that scene. It didn't diminish. It didn't diminish the characters. Far from it. This scene elevated the 1986 Top Gun characters, Maverick and Iceman. What a great compliment to this story to have this discussion between these two guys about something that mattered, about an incident that took place in the prior film, and how it's preventing the protagonist, the lead character, from growing and becoming effective in this film. It's quite a scene. And of course, it ends with one of the best jokes and like comic reliefs, where he's like, "Who's the best pilot?" And he's like, "Man, this is a good moment. Let's not ruin it." Just nails it. Like gave us just the perfect level of comic relief that we needed.
Well, and also acknowledgement of an issue that they would have. Like,
and the writers brilliantly left it unresolved. No, right. He could have said, "You were Iceman. You were the best pilot." Iceman would be like, "No, you." No, he's just like, he left it as though Maverick assumed it was him. but never said it. Yeah, it's a great. It's so well written. Yes. And the genius of it is in the scarcity of words on the side of Val Kilmer's character, which the reason I think Val Kilmer might have done it is it's the few words are so effective. I wonder if he himself, as he's become very skilled in communicating with brief phrases, probably in real life, if he brought that into the scene because it was so effective in the scene.
We had from right there, like we've been going intentionally more casual on this episode, but we do go from right there into our beach scene.
Into our which one?
Beach scenes, throwing footballs, everybody on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the rip. They had. It's almost like they had to because they had the volleyball.
Well, they had to, but that's part of. That's such an iconic part of the original Top Gun. It feels like, okay, we have to bring this back because people love it.
My cousin, I have a cousin. She's a couple years older than me. She's a huge Tom Cruise girl. She loves Tom Cruise, and that's her favorite scene. He's good. Yeah. Sable Phoenix says you don't see
before you get into that. You don't see me scenes written that way before anymore because most modern screenwriters have no concept of subtext.
Absolutely
that
correct.
Entire scene was subtext. It was what you're talking about. Yes, with
man, very well
Maverick
said.
And Iceman, yes.
Sable Phoenix. I would say the genius of it is not only that it's so heavy with subtext, but that it was able to take an idea that's this big and communicate it through subtext this big. I just that's an incredible achievement from a writing perspective.
Yeah.
So exactly.
So then we go to the football scene on the beach, but like it feels like it feels completely right because this is a Top Gun thing.
It's a good song too.
And they do it right. They do it right.
Are you worried about it? What was the song in 1986? Was it Playing with the Boys?
Oh, I don't remember.
Anyway, my kids love the song. I looked it up. I forgot what it was called. It's called Dog Fighting Football, where you play offense and defense simultaneously.
Okay.
So okay. Now getting back, I didn't want to forget something you had mentioned.
Okay.
You said earlier that there's a classic trope. The mission's been moved up. right?
Yeah, I have that too. Yeah.
I didn't want to forget that. You
Okay.
you had kind of highlighted that.
Yeah. That happens about now, right?
Yeah, so they said that the mission's been moved up. They have 1 week left. And what's interesting is they never really resolved the tactical side of practicing the canyon run. They move immediately to the tactical side of going up the mountain, inverting, going down the mountain, hitting the target, and then going ballistic to get out of the mountain. That's a completely different tactical part of this mission, flight mission. And here's what I like, because I didn't think I really picked up on this the first time or two that I saw this, but I pick up on it more and more on multiple viewings, and now it holds a lot of weight with me. This mission is almost impossible. And there's even a part where Phoenix, the female aviator, she even says, "Sir, is this mission even possible?" And during practice is when they have their two mishaps, and they happen simultaneously.
Yes. Yes.
Coyote passes out from the high G pullout. Totally understandable and believable problem that would take place. And then right after they get Phoenix revived, they have a bird strike, and Phoenix crashes her plane and has to eject. So and then after this is when Maverick and Rooster really confront each other. And that's when Maverick delivers the line from the trailer, "My dad believed in you. I won't make that mistake."
Yeah. Yes.
And then, of course, Iceman dies. They show the funeral, and the funeral scene has some weight. I think we all love Iceman's almost like, for our generation, I mean, Iceman is like one of the big dudes. Like, he's like the older brother for all of us. He's the guy that we all kind of would respect.
Well, he's been Maverick's shield, so it's really important that he dies in this, because he's been the shield. He's gotten him out of this, and now he's gone.
Yeah. Well, reviving Coyote, James. They revived Coyote, but yes, Phoenix. You're right. Phoenix should have done that, because Phoenix is the revival.
You're right. Yes, you're right. Maybe it should have been Phoenix. That would have been our whole Phoenix crew here. That would have been it. Reviving Phoenix. Yes. So right when Iceman dies, immediately Maverick is booted from the mission. He's no longer leading this mission. He's no longer in charge of training. The reason why I think this is so important is because the first change that Admiral Simpson does is change the flight time from 2.5 minutes to get in and get it and get out to 4 minutes, which the movie sets up clearly. If you go 4 minutes and go that slow, enemy fighters, our next generation fighters, will tear you apart. You really don't stand a chance. And there's even a scene early in the film that sets this up too. There's a scene in early part where Admiral Simpson is talking to Maverick, and he's like, "Yeah, and then we'll hit the target." And then Maverick goes, "And make it home." Right.
And
yes.
Memory's
Yeah.
like,
I was very aware of that as I watched this the last time through.
Yes. So he's like, "And make it home, right,
is
sir?"
It hitting
And
the
he's
target,
like,
or is it hitting the target and also getting home? Yes.
Right. And Simpson doesn't respond when pressed. He's like, "There's certain risks we all understand." He kind of gives this BS bureaucratic response. Well, it's an overshot scene to some extent until now. Now that we see that Simpson is, first thing he wants to do is make sure they just hit the target. We see that Simpson is focused on the strike. Maverick has been focused on getting them the hell out of there alive. And that's why he's so tough on Rooster, because he can't live with himself if Goose died under his watch and also Rooster.
But he was the one who made it to there, but wasn't going to be able to make it out. Man, that's
correct.
Deep. Right.
So
if that's all you wanted, he is your man.
100%. He's the one who's going to fly it slow and make it to the target, but he's going to be intercepted by multiple.
He'll be killed on the way out.
He'll be killed on the way out with the in a dogfight. So this is huge, because you can even tell. Again, this I picked up on all this on the later watches, but all the pilots understand this. You could see them looking at each other and exchanging glances. They're like, this is a one-way ticket with 4 minutes. The Simpson approach, the Admiral Simpson approach, is a one-way ticket, and he knows that. So, and while I was taking all my notes,
the policy done.
But you're right, it gets the main job done, but it doesn't have regard for life the way Maverick regarded life.
Yes.
And that's huge because I ended up circling this in my notes and putting stars on it. And I call this the Maverick scene because you just said, you're not on the schedule today, Maverick. He's like, I'm going anyway.
I'm going anyway.
But what is he doing on this flight? When it's one of the great visuals of G forces and inertia. You feel the tension. There's no music being played. It's just sounds and the pilot moving back and forth. He's navigating it. And I love Phoenix's thing. She goes, nice. Nice. Maverick's going to run the course. I love it. So what is he doing in this scene? The obvious thing, the surface thing, he's proving it can be done. But what is he really doing in this scene? He is saving all of those pilots' lives. He's saving their lives with this run. Because if he doesn't prove it right now, in the next 2 minutes and 30 seconds, or 2 minutes, 15 seconds, he sets, then those pilots are going to fly the 4-minute mission and they're done. Because if Maverick does this in 2 minutes and 40 seconds or 2 minutes and 50, Simpson's not going to buy it. He's going to dishonorably discharge Maverick, and the kids are going to run that 4-minute mission. So he has to get this right. So when I'm watching this scene now, I'm like, he's saving their lives right here. This is almost the climax. Interesting.
I knew you were about to say that. I was like, oh my God, do I bring that right now?
I actually wasn't even thinking that. That is great. It is because you are physically interposing yourself in front of lives that are defenseless who share the battlefield. So I guess there are some nuances there that aren't quite represented since they're not flying with them, but it is very similar. I would say the ultimate Shield Maiden moment is at the end when he gets in front of Rooster with the that's a pure Shield Maiden moment where he physically interposes himself to save Rooster. However, that's what
isn't it just like when he does later on with yes,
Sable Phoenix is all over it. All over that archetype.
That's probably
100%.
Yes.
But this is similar in more of a spiritual sense because it's not obvious. But if he proves, think about this, if he can do it in 2 minutes and 15 seconds, he has proven that it can be done. And there is no way at that point to ever go back to the Simpson version of this mission. It's impossible if he can prove it can be done. If he can't, because Simpson's entire mission is based on the fact that the mission cannot be done in 2 minutes and 30. So he might as well sacrifice the pilots and at least hit the target. But if it can be done, then we stick with the Maverick mission, the Pete Mitchell mission, which is 2 minutes, 30 seconds. And he does it in 2 minutes, 15. So this is a great scene. It's one of the best scenes of the whole movie. And I think one of the greatest scenes in the 2-movie franchise. And I would say the greatest moment for Pete Mitchell in the whole double movie, this scene where he does this. That's Maverick. He's doing it without permission, which is a Maverick move. He's doing something that he even says made the craft no longer airworthy when he was done. And he saves the lives of all of his students. And it shows that Maverick's concern, similar to what we talked about. When did we talked about this with Star Trek II, with Captain Kirk. When I think James Bacon mentioned it. Captain Kirk in the Kobayashi Maru said he reprogrammed the computer to save the ship. He did not reprogram the computer to destroy the Klingons. So Kirk's first most important priority was the saving of lives, not the defeating of the Klingons. And here we have Pete Mitchell, Maverick. His biggest concern is to save the lives of his cadets, or not quite cadets, of the students in Top Gun, not just to hit the target. So another parallel with Captain Kirk, in which the value for his men's the men and women below him, their lives, he placed a premium on that, whereas Admiral Simpson did not. and he gets a
yes.
standing O for it.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Yeah, man. So anyway, I just wanted to say, like, while watching it this time for this discussion, I realized that this is my favorite part of the movie, and it's the most defining moment for Pete Mitchell, in my opinion, and it's possibly the defining moment for Top Gun as a franchise. This is the Maverick moment. He's not overcoming his low confidence like in the first movie. That's like a hero's journey thing. Now he's saving the lives of everybody else by proving his superior wrong.
Well, where else do you want to go from your notes?
Well, the final parts of my notes are it's the mission. It's the final 30 minutes of the movie. It's the mission. I actually have some notes here, but it's mostly an action sequence, and it's really the fulfilling of the tactical reality the movie has already set up, which is the canyon run at low altitude to evade the surface-to-air missiles, and then the steep dive and target with laser on target to strike the target, and then to pull out. I will say my biggest problem with the movie, and it's kind of a nitpicky thing, but now that I've seen it, I keep noticing it. They do it even in the practice run. They fire the missile at the target. A missile should be traveling faster than the plane. So they should fire the missile. There should be an explosion that the plane flies through. They fire the missile, the plane pulls out, and then there's an explosion. So they really almost freeze the missile as the plane pulls out in order to make this work cinematically.
Because we're not talking about the speed of light here. We're talking about sub-light speeds.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I feel like missiles move faster than planes, at least as far as I understood. The missile should have struck the target and exploded before they got their pull out. But the movie, I think.
Yeah, no, there was something that I missed in the original speed. Could be remote. There was something could be remote detonated. There was something that I missed because actually my brother and I talked about that. And we're like, after we were like, the initial responses loved the movie, right? You know, whatever. They're like,
of course.
Next. But then the next thing was something about that because I was trying to I forget exactly what we thought now because I thought there was some kind of different relationship between the planes because they've got two planes that fly in together and then two planes that fly in behind.
Right. Dagger 3 and 4.
Yeah. So I thought that it was something like, what did I think that it was like? God, well, I can't even remember now. I don't even remember what we were saying.
One's painting the target, and then the other one shoots it as he's flying away.
Yeah. And see, that's when Bob should have been essential because there should have been something that only Bob could have done in order to paint that target. That's when Bob should have shined. So that moment should have been in this movie that it was not. Bob should have shined that like your technical capability, like the only person who could possibly have painted that target was Bob. Because it'd been hit with shrapnel, like he's recomputing something like R2D2, and then right, hold on, whatever, let's do that. That's what it should have been. But it's God, I can't remember now because it was something about. Actually, I think it was that when I thought this was happening originally, when I first watched this movie, that the reason you were sending two planes was redundancy. Because if somebody misses, then the next plane will hit it. But that's not actually true. Because that seems like true. Then you send 4 planes. Because if somebody, you've got to hit 2 strikes. So if somebody misses, there's another plane coming behind you to hit it. That seems more likely. But that wasn't the case here. You need both of those planes to strike.
Well, I think they said that the first plane's job was to blow a hole.
Yeah.
And the second plane's job was to shoot it into the hole.
Actually hit the target. Right.
Right,
but
that was a pretty cool explosion.
Planes, so that if the first one, if either of those first missed, there was a follow up. Like to me, that means there should have been at least 3 pairs going in.
There should have been a second set. Yeah, daggers 5 and 6.
Yeah.
A bunker buster mission.
Actually, I forgot this to say. Like Sable thinks this, It was like the Death Star, though the target is kind of a tunnel or chute when the missiles are traveling down right. Yes, which may not be realistic, but I always thought that would set the timing. Yes, and actually, it made me think that actually maybe it would have been cooler if in Star Wars, the original movie, we had seen them fail at this. What if we had seen prior to going out to fly out to blow up the Death Star, that if we had seen them practicing the Death Star run and they had failed?
See, that would have been that's what this movie gave us.
Yes, that would have been cool if you had seen the X-Wing pilots failing and they have another week to practice this run. And then all of a sudden you're told, we don't have a week. They're on their way right now. You have to do this right now.
Yeah.
That would have been cool.
Well, see, maybe, and I think that's part of why Maverick kind of even though it emulates Star Wars in a sense, it does stand on its own. It really focuses on the technical expertise required just to do the mission, a nearly impossible mission by the standards of the film. We see that it cannot be done, that it actually, remember we talked about the importance of competency. We focused on that word. This movie shows that. Like, even the most competent pilots can't quite get this one right. And they run out of time. They never got it right in practice. And now Maverick does it once. And that's all they have to go on. If Maverick could do it, then it can be done. But now we got to go do it for real, and we're out of time. And I guess one of the important parts of the final sequence is who's going to be your wingman? And obviously Hangman thinks it's going to be him. And he goes, I choose Rooster. And I love the way he says it. He says it deliberate, and he looks right at him. He's like, I want Rooster. And Rooster's shocked. Everyone's shocked. It's a moment. But the only person who's not surprised in this moment, based on the acting alone, is Tom Cruise, is Maverick. He's clear-headed. He's decisive. And everyone else is surprised except him. And I thought it was very well done from an acting performance. And then they say, it's kind of a throwaway line, but they're like, everyone else go to your stations for like backup duty, in case you're needed, which of course comes in to play later. But he picks Rooster. So he's going to risk Rooster's life because he thinks Rooster's the best man for this job. And that's what this is. That's what this movie has been, a focus on competency. And he says, Rooster, you're the most competent. I want you at my side. Which, of course, is his greatest fear. So this is also Maverick kind of overcoming. He's letting it go. Per Iceman's advice, he's letting it go. He's not going to be afraid of losing Rooster because of what happened in the past. He's going to pick the most competent man, and he's going to go into battle with him. Obviously a big deal. So it's interesting because Rooster has his little arc here. He goes in slow for a little bit. He kind of backs off the throttle, and then he picks it back up to catch up to Maverick. I agree with you, Heath. It would have been much better if Bob had an arc here where he shows some technical competency to get the laser working at the last second to ensure the success of the mission. Would have been great. I will say real quick, I do love the cruise missiles coming in overhead.
Yeah. Well, we're in now. We can't stop now.
I love it. It's a great line. Don't turn it back now. The only other tactical issue that I had a problem with was, and James and a couple people have addressed it, the timing of the missile, like shoot, wait, get out, then explode. The other one is they're like, this is a critical mission. And then there's the SAMs. They never really had a plan for that. They just suddenly fly out, and the SAM starts shooting at them, the surface-to-air missiles. They're like, oh, my God, we're caught in all of it. I'm like, what was the plan? Like, they didn't seem to really ever address what happened when you flew out. They stressed the importance of evading enemy aircraft, but they seem to be hopelessly in trouble with the SAMs just shooting everywhere. I thought what they should have said was, there's more SAMs than intelligence. Intelligence had this many. Now there's 3 times that or something, just to let us know that this may have been a surprise, but they suddenly didn't have a plan for the SAMs. And then obviously there's the Shield Maiden moment, which is a classic clear-cut version of it where Maverick gets shot down saving Rooster, and then
Yeah.
of course Rooster comes back, and they shadow, or they kind of get the hint that he's asking his dad what to do, Goose, and he's like, "Talk to me, Dad." And what's Sable Phoenix saying? No one knew they were going to be above the hard. Well, they had to if they were going to fly out. If to fly out of that mountain valley, you're going to have to clear the hard deck at some point.
Because they actually established in the beginning that once you fly out, okay, if you've gone through the 9 Gs, you're all of a sudden now up. You're in radar. You're going to be seen by radars and being hit by the SAMs.
Right. And what I'm saying is they never really talked about that or said this was going to be an issue, or, hey, be prepared to use your countermeasures. It was all about the enemy aircraft. And they pulled off this highly technical, almost impossible mission, only to be caught in this web of SAMs, which seemed to pose a serious threat to them, because it shoots down Maverick, because he saves Rooster. And of course, Rooster goes back for him. And I'll just have to say, my kids love this scene, because when they were with me in the movie, everyone laughed pretty hard in the theater. And like now the kids, because I said we saw it multiple times, I noticed that my kids were very excited to laugh at this moment. Now that they knew they were in on the joke, they got it. It's funny. It's when Maverick comes running back and finds Rooster. He's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I saved you." He's like, "No, I saved you." He's like, "What the hell were you thinking?" And he's like, "You told me not to think."
I love that scene.
And he puts up his hands.
There's nothing
Everyone
to
in the
say
theater,
beyond
when we
that.
saw it, laughed really hard, because it's a funny freaking moment. And my kids, even now, if we turned it on, they just wait for that moment, because they love the humor of it. You told me not to think.
And there's nothing you can say to that. It's like, oh, well, you did. Yep. All right. And Tom Cruise, Maverick recognizes that. They're like,
well, it's funny. Like,
all right.
Maverick and us, the audience, were like, "Hey, you did tell him. You said not to think.
You said don't think." So there we go. That was instinct. I think that was great. Yes.
So, and then just to summarize the end, you have to, just the brilliant use of the reintroduction of putting Maverick back into a Tomcat, an F-14 Tomcat.
Mm-hmm.
It was an old resale type of fighter jet that some third world country, or not Russia, has in this airbase. And here they put Maverick and Rooster back in that cockpit, and they wrote it into the script. I thought it was an ingenious move.
And they set it up in the beginning.
Yes.
This is not, and I have to give them extreme credit for this, because we have talked about this on other videos where they didn't actually set something up quite well. But here in this, they actually even set that up.
And
They
a few
set
old
that up
relics.
in the mission briefing, so they even set it up that it was there. So I have to give them
100%.
extreme props for that.
Well, and they did it and even more brilliant. They told you they even have a few old F-14s, and they use that line. They're not the only ones holding on to old relics.
Exactly.
So they piggyback their setup line with a dig. So it just worked perfectly. And I think all of us 80s kids will appreciate this. I love this line now. It's such a small line, but I love it. Rooster gets into the back piloting seat, and he's like, "There's a UHF-2 circuit breaker." When was the last time you heard of a UHF-2 circuit breaker? I remember hooking up like Nintendo, and you had to switch it to UHF or VHF. And so all of us kids, if you guys are in the chat, if you grew up in the 80s, when you hear UHF, you're like, "Oh, yeah, that's Tomcat. That's 80s territory." And here's Rooster, who's like, "What the hell?" And by the way, that stuff looked old back there. All those circuit breakers. So anyway, they get into the dogfight. He's able to overpower a next-gen fighter using a Tomcat. And then they run out of moves, essentially, the way the story is told. He goes overseas, and there's one more fighter pilot. They're out of countermeasures. This pilot's got him dead to rights, and they even show the enemy pilot, launch the missile, only to be blown up with the missile a second later. Hangman, the most unlikable character of the film, has his own arc and redeems himself. this is your savior speaking. And has his moment, and he comes back and redeems himself, and they land back on the deck, and it's great. It's just a feel-good movie. It ends the way a Top Gun movie should end, on the deck of an aircraft.
I wanted
carrier.
more out of that, and I wish I had actually gotten to finish going all the way through the movie, because that's still my absolute favorite part of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
The help from without, or the
yeah.
help unlooked for. And I actually wanted it done better in this movie. I did want, because that's supposed to be, Hangman showing up, right? But it didn't punch the level of drama that I wanted it to. Because first of all, because it seems like in order to punch that level of drama, first of all, you have to completely forget about the person who's going to come rescue you. And I don't think you had done that. I got to check this, because like I said, this is the part of the movie where I hadn't actually gotten to finish before we got started. But I don't feel like we'd completely forgotten about him. And then also, we need more people. I think we needed more people in order to make this believable. So if all of a sudden, boom, he had showed up with an entire squadron, leading a whole squadron, it would have been better. I would have liked to have seen him in the lead of every other plane on that carrier.
That's interesting. If there was like Dagger 5 and 6 or Dagger 7 and 8.
I wanted them all. I wanted to completely forget about them, and then to have him in the lead of everything.
That is interesting.
I want that. I love that moment, and I want it to hit hard. And they could have hit it harder, I think.
Yeah, I could see that.
This is the Han Solo moment, and when you hit the Han Solo moment, you have got to hit it hard. And we're going to talk about that when it comes to Star Trek 2. Star Trek 6, actually. Star Trek
Target
2,
that explosion and fire.
Yeah, I want that more. I love this moment in filmmaking or storytelling.
Yes, me too.
Storytelling. I love this moment. So when there are moments for it to be more dramatic and they don't take it, I feel it. This moment should have been extremely dramatic. It's that moment, but man, if somebody had said, no, wait a minute, let's crank this moment up to an 11, it could have been even better.
Yeah. Interesting. You know how they could have done it? Now that you got my wheels spinning, there's a moment where they say, Admiral Simpson, what should we do? He's like, turn him around. We're not going to lose anyone else today. He should have said, Hangman, power down, return to deck. And they should have showed him powering down the aircraft or something. And then we assume he reversed course when he shows up or something later. But I thought it was I think you're right, actually, from a dramatic sense, an instinct for dramatics. You're probably right. It did kind of come out quick. But it was enough to be a likable moment. And it was, I think it was just enough to get there. I agree.
I agree with that. I agree with that. It was enough. I agree with that. It was enough. But when I'm looking at this script, I'm going, if you're looking for more drama to punch, this is a scene where it could have been punched even harder.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that when we come to Star Trek 6. We're going to talk about that a lot, because I've actually rewritten that sequence to be more, because there's the same sequence in Star Trek 6, because this is the same sequence as the Excelsior showing up to defend the Enterprise against the cloaked.
That was very Shield maiden moment too.
It's the exact same sequence. This is it but let me tell you, I have rewritten that scene in Star Trek 6 to be more dramatic. Yeah, because that's my problem. You're like, what's the problem with it? Isn't it great? It's great. No, this is one of those scenes. This exact same sequence shows up in Star Trek 6. It's Hangman, but Hangman is the Excelsior. It's
We've given them another target to shoot at.
Right, exactly. It's the same sequence, and it's also the same sequence as Han Solo showing up. Right, it's the same sequence. This is the same moment in all the filmmaking, and they could have hit it harder. I love this. They could have hit it harder in Maverick, and they also could have hit it harder in Star Trek 6. And I've actually rewritten that entire sequence.
That's awesome, because
Star Trek 6, we're going to talk about that.
I had a great discussion with my dad after our Star Trek 3 discussion, and he and I talked for another 40 minutes about Star Trek 3. And I'm not kidding. We talked for 40 minutes about it, and I ended up writing down all the revisions that you and I came up with, and that he and I came up with. So whenever we get to it, I'll give a brief summary of the revised Star Trek 3 storyline. Should take me 2 or 3 minutes to get through that.
Well, we should do that. And in fact, here's another thing that we should do, but it may not be allowed, because I actually found out this in the rules for Star Trek fan films, that you can't recreate something that's already been done. I wonder if we can possibly, because I was like, oh my God, listen, I have a complete rewrite of that Star Trek 6. I love Star Trek 6.
Me too.
I have a complete rewrite of that scene. What if we just completely rewrote and then reshot that particular sequence in Star Trek 6 to say, like, this is how it should be done? I'm not sure that's actually allowed with the fan film, like,
crowd.
No, Paramount permissions. Like,
really?
Because Paramount like has certain things like what you can do with a fan film and what you cannot.
Well, we can do it here anyway.
We might have to do it anyway, because I'm like, oh my God, like I can show you how this would have been better.
Well, that's interesting that you've keyed on it, because I do feel that it was thin, the Hangman coming in to save, but it was adequate enough to complete the arc and to get it done and to make it happen and to have the heroics. So it was, it was like perfectly adequate. But you're right. Like, you definitely could have played that up, and you definitely could have used it for bigger dramatics. Star Wars did a great job of it. I mean, part of it was the bravado Han Solo came in with,
yeah. And Star Wars did it so well, because you are not thinking about Han Solo. You're completely done thinking about Han Solo, and then all of a sudden he's there, and that's what makes it so perfect.
And let me say, I think you're totally right, and I like that you focus on this, because while studying heroines, when I was writing about heroines, one of my biggest issues is that modern films, and even film literary critics and stuff, they have this weird issue about heroines getting help, especially from a man. And they're like, they should be able to show heroines doing it all on their own, show how independent they are. And I'm like, that's not right. That doesn't make them stronger. Like, some of our favorite heroes of all time have gotten a major assist moment from another character, like over and over and over again, whether it's Luke or Kirk or, you just said Kirk and Sulu, or Maverick and Goose. They need help. There's nothing wrong with getting help from another character. In fact, heroic partners is part of the archetypal, what I would call a part of a validation sequence, in where, as the hero has heroic partners like Han Solo, who turns around and comes back to join Luke, that's proof that Luke has arrived. Because Luke is, he's attacking the Death Star. He's leading this attack at this point. He's risking his life, and he has now inspired heroic behavior in another person where it wasn't before.
Exactly. There are two. This is, to me, as I say again, my favorite moment in the hero's journey: help from without. And there are two huge ways to get it wrong. The first way is to make the help very weak, which we've been talking about here, that perhaps, because if there's a way to make it stronger, then make it stronger.
Right.
In Maverick, we're saying that it's a bit weak. It could have been stronger. We're not saying that it doesn't work. Okay, some things would work. It also works in Star Trek 6, but when we get to Star Trek 6, I'm going to tell you some other ways when it could be stronger. So not making it strong enough is a major problem, and then also making it weak or not be there is a major problem.
100%.
Those are two ways you can go wrong, because other people will say, which is a huge problem, people say that this is the moment where somebody else comes in and completes the story for the hero. And that doesn't work.
Right.
Because the hero, the person whose story this is, has to finish the story.
Right.
So sometimes other people will go like, oh, let's do something strange or different or whatever. And in their help from without moment, they will have that person come in and solve the quest for the hero.
Right. Well, that
fails. That also fails.
That's
you can go either way and fail at this moment. If it's done right, it's amazing. But there are two ways you can fail.
I agree. That's a great assessment. And if someone comes in and solves it for the hero, that's to me akin to a Deus Ex Machina.
Right.
Which I'm strongly against. I always joke Last Jedi ends with a Luke Ex Machina because he fights the AT-ATs, but he's not really there. I mean, to me, that's terrible writing.
I
But
can't believe you said that.
the idea of heroic partners should not be underestimated. Although the partners do not, to your point, complete the quest for the hero.
Because it would not have been good if Han Solo had actually made the shot to destroy the.
Yeah, look out, Luke! I got it.
I got it. That would not have worked. It would have been a much weaker story. You want Han Solo to come in and clear the way for Luke to make the shot. That's right. That's perfect. You forget Han Solo exists. He returns. That completes his arc. Exactly what you're talking about. He becomes his own hero. Perfect. You forget about him. He comes in and he clears the way for Luke to make the shot. Well, that's perfect.
Inspiring heroic partners is part of the hero and the heroine's journey, because their commitment to whatever their journey is, their commitment to this cause or this mission is inspiring. There's a great line actually in the movie Braveheart. Uncompromising men are easy to admire. That's what Robert the Bruce's father says at one point. So there is something about the hero who's committed to the fight. It is innately inspiring. So when people come answering that call, they're now inspired. They are part of this quest. And it reinforces that the hero spiritually is correct. And what they're doing in modern films with heroines is taking that away. And what they're really doing is saying, heroines can do it themselves and they don't need you, and they're not inspiring anyone else, but they will have cheerleaders. They will have people cheering for them on the side. That's weaker.
It's weaker. It's
weaker because people cheering from the sidelines are people who have not been inspired enough to act in line with the heroine or the hero. So I guess my point is that heroes, by inspiring others to heroic action, like Hangman, who was a very selfish, very Han Solo-like character in Top Gun Maverick, both Rooster and Maverick inspired him to a higher calling. He risked himself and he took down the guy at the key moment, and he's now a heroic partner. And you would like to imagine if there's going to be a next, let's say there's Top Gun 3, that Hangman would be one of the hero characters, the same way Han Solo was in Empire Strikes Back. Now he's part of the good guy clan. So anyway, I agree with you. That's a great observation. Hangman's redeemed. It's heroic. It's a satisfying ending to some extent, but thin.
It was thin. If I were looking at this, I'd be like, let's crank that Hangman's moment up to an 11. Let's go. That would have helped it. It would have helped it.
Cool.
Okay. Well, first of all, I have another question to ask you, but we basically come to the end of this film. Roll to Win Crap says, "Okay, I like this show."
I like that commenter.
I know. That's my dad.
Oh, that's awesome.
So all right. So he was talking about that with this element. So my dad comes in and says, "Okay, I like this show."
That's awesome.
So, what I was wait, what was I going to say with that? Because we're wrapping things up. We're 2 hours and 40 minutes in. This is what we call a casual show. This was just a lightweight casual show. That's what Doug and I call lightweight. We're like, we do not
it's
feel
surfacey
like into something tonight. Let's just go for this. So where was I going with that? There was something I was going to say. Oh my God, I forget.
The help from without.
Well, help from without. Well, I can't remember. That's it. So, what are your thoughts? Maybe I'll come up with in just a moment. What are your thoughts as you would conclude?
Well, I guess my final conclusion is this is a total success. This movie.
Well, it is. Yes, it is. Yes.
It took a film from 1986, which was very much a film within its time period. 1986, the Soviet Union was actually still out there when Top Gun 1986 was made. So there was still a Cold War mentality in the world. And it seemed to be a standalone film. I don't think anyone was asking for a sequel to Top Gun. The Cold War ended. We moved on. And then suddenly Top Gun Maverick comes out, and here we're reintroduced to a large extent to fighter jets, dogfighting, and suddenly it's awesome again. It's freaking awesome. We loved the dogfighting and the gravity and the inertia and the hard turns, and like jets are cool again after Top Gun Maverick. Tom Cruise is cool again after Top Gun Maverick. But Top Gun is cool again. Kenny Loggins is cool again. Danger Zone. So, I mean, this movie has just as across the board of success. Even that song, Lady Gaga wrote that Hold My Hand song. It's pretty good. It was nominated for an Academy Award. So and by the way, I would say I think they're setting up Penny's daughter, Amelia, as a potential torchbearer for the next Aviator. Her name is Amelia, obviously, like Amelia Earhart. She's obviously around naval culture and military bases. So she would be an interesting follow-up character.
My dad wants to say Kenny Loggins was cool for a long time here.
So roll to win craps thinks. So Kenny Loggins has always held a high.
He has maintained coolness. Yeah, throughout all this time, he has maintained coolness.
Yeah. Well,
and James also says Lady Gaga is also. So yeah, you've got some pushback on the musical side of this. That Kenny Loggins has always been incredible, and also Lady Gaga also has maintained that.
So I can't really say Kenny Loggins is cool again. I could say Kenny Loggins, as always,
continued to be cool.
Continues to his legacy of coolness with Top Gun Maverick. And by the way, Tom Cruise. I've heard discussions how the movie star is dead, and how you could put Chris Hemsworth in Thor and he's big, but you put him in Men in Black and no one goes to see it. So like the era of the movie star is dead. They're like, except for Tom Cruise.
Exactly.
And I've also heard
Tom Cruise.
Keanu Reeves are two guys that could still put butts in seats. Yeah. And by the way, to test this theory, everyone listening, watch to see what Mission Impossible 7 does next month. My kids cannot wait. We actually, because my kids got to be Tom Cruise fans because of Top Gun Maverick, we went back and watched all of the Mission Impossibles. So now they're Mission Impossible fans, and their movie that they can't wait to go see is Mission Impossible 7. So we're ready to go.
Well, I think that's Tom, because I hear about Tom Cruise all the time. Like if you're growing, but also Keanu Reeves, that's a very interesting point that he's been able to do it too.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're growing up today and you want to be a movie star, is that even something you can be? That it may have ended. That
it may have ended. It seemed ended. Well, a lot of movie stars are not endearing themselves to the public. They take sometimes very divisive stances or are very opinionated about things, and I think that goes against them. It's an era of social media, so we get to know what they think about their tuna sandwich, and do we want to know? When I grew up, it was definitely the era of the movie star. And I think we several generations have grown up. My dad, they grew up with John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. And I mean, some big names back then. And there were some big names before that.
No, even the 90s. The 90s, I would say, is definitely an era of the movie star because now I can't call any of their names at the moment, which is terrible. What's Ace Ventura?
Jim Carrey. I was just going to say.
Right. Like, for instance, Jim Carrey. Do you care what the movie is, but you're just going to see the latest Jim Carrey movie? That was an era still of a movie star. You would go to see a movie because, that's the latest Jim Carrey movie.
Totally. You'd go because it's him. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think that we have that so much anymore because we've moved into the era of the franchise. You're going to go to see a movie because it's Marvel, or you're going to go to see a movie because it's something that there are only a few, like Tom Cruise, who are still enduring. That if you're like, hey, I want to be a movie star, people are going to come to see a movie because I'm in it. That hasn't been the case for 2 decades.
Well, I agree. Well, and like Robert Downey Jr. is the best Iron Man I could possibly imagine. He's phenomenal. But then you put him in Dr. Dolittle. No one went to go see that. Like no one cares.
No one cares.
But Tom Cruise, he's revitalized himself in a lot of ways, even with me. Like I was never a Tom Cruise fan. I liked certain movies of his to a large degree, but I would never call myself a Tom Cruise fan. I'm a Tom Cruise fan now because of Top Gun Maverick. I think also because my kids got to be such a big fan. So now, like we watched all the Mission Impossibles. Now we're enjoying Tom Cruise. We found out he did all his own stunts. You should YouTube and see some of the stunts he's doing. He's crazy. And now we can't wait to see Mission Impossible. But I would say in a large way, Top Gun Maverick jump-started a dying industry with Hollywood after the COVID era. Suddenly, you had Spider-Man No Way Home because of its premise. It was just amazing, and it was a good movie. And then you had Top Gun Maverick really blow the doors off. There's no more excuses. You make a good movie. You love your fans. We're going to come out and see your film, and we'll support you.
Yeah. Yeah, because that was the excuse was, oh, well, there's still COVID. People aren't coming. Then this movie came out, and it was like, oh, well, if you do a good movie, then people just come out in droves.
Right. Oh, yes. Tropic Thunder. Tom Cruise as Les Grossman. Probably one of the best cameos in history. Have you ever seen that, Heath?
No, I have not.
Oh, my God. So Tropic Thunder is hysterical. And it in this, knowing the way the world is today, how sensitive the world is, me and my wife watched it recently. It's even funnier now because it's so politically incorrect. It's so funny. And then Tom Cruise, you won't even recognize him the first time you see him, plays a role as a cameo. He steals the show. He just chews up the screen with this role. And he's so funny. Like you have to see it. It's hysterical. It's one of the funniest roles I've ever seen someone take for such a minor thing. Yeah, until the credits and that where he's dancing and stuff. The dance is so ridiculous. Oh man, Tropic Thunder is another one we could talk about. Where he's like, "You want me to leave my friend to die in the desert just for money?" And he's like, "Yes." Tom Cruise is great in Tropic Thunder.
All right. Well, I suppose that wraps that up. So I think this is great because it came in under 3 hours. This was just a casual, let's just talk about a movie. This was just a casual movie analysis, and we came in under 3 hours. So that is great. So we will, I think we should wrap this up tomorrow night, though. Tomorrow I got to get ready because Michelle Smith is going to be back. So she said she would do it again. So I got to get ready to really
Michelle
go
with
deep
2 L's
with Michelle with 2 L's. So Doug, have you watched any of their show, their channel?
I watched her show with you.
Okay.
And she's like, it's the light, it's the Force of Light.
The Force of Light. Force of Light Entertainment. Right.
I haven't, but that's only because I haven't branched out recently.
Well, I do have to say that she and her sister did a first time watching video from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And I'm just saying, just look that up. Force of Light Entertainment, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. They posted it like a week and a half ago or something like that. That is such a fantastic, because it was like watching Monty Python and the Holy Grail for the first time again.
I was just going to say.
It was like experiencing for the first time again. And she and her sister are responding in real time to that. And wow, that's one of the YouTube videos that I have most enjoyed over the last few months. Like I was like, oh my God, watching them talk about Monty Python and the Holy Grail was so fantastic.
Dude, that's awesome. I'll check that out. Absolutely.
So do that. But tomorrow I got to get everything ready because we're talking about, I'm talking with Michelle tomorrow. Thursday, we will probably do a members only stream where we do a hangout and you talk about whatever the members want to talk about, and we'll bring people on. Friday, I'm going to try to do dinner and a board game where I do Hero Quest again. Saturday, RM will be doing a watch through of the Cultist season 2. So I'm going to be with her doing Cultist season 2 on Saturdays. There's like
I made a note of that. So Saturday at what time?
I believe it's 5 Central. I'll have to check, but I believe it's 5 Central. That's what time it was the last time. We did like two Saturdays ago. We did the Cultist season 1 and did a watch through, and it was at 5 Central. So I believe this Saturday at 5 Central, we're going to do season 2.
Okay.
So that's like 2 streams a day for the next 5 days. And then where was
Keith,
it going?
you are a monster, my friend.
I know there's so much streaming going on. James says, what movie for next Tuesday, or is it too early to discuss? Doug, you and I haven't talked about that, but isn't that the 20th? Yes, it is. Okay, so Brianna specifically wanted to talk about good and evil and storytelling on the 20th.
That's right, 20th.
So she said that. If you want to be there, Doug, you're welcome to, and you can bring in your side of the story, because Brianna specifically wanted to respond to Michelle.
Okay, I think it's best for Brianna to have the floor, like to herself, like because I think she wanted to outline some things in terms of like her view. She seems very productive in terms of like coming up with her own way to explain things. So I think she should have at least one show like you gave me to just outline something.
Okay, well then maybe you and I do the same thing in 2 weeks then. So maybe it's just Brianna and me on storytelling.
With good and evil?
Good and evil and storytelling next week. She said she was documenting all kinds of notes when Michelle was going on. So she does want to respond to Michelle.
Okay.
But I actually think that you and I would have a really good conversation on that subject. So maybe then after that, you and I should converse on that subject.
I would love to. I look at it. I have a different side, of course, which usually integrates with anyone else, but I integrate it into world building and how to build out a story. If you understand the ethical premise of the story, what is good and what is bad, according to you, or evil, how evil plays out in stories. Also, some philosophical discussions, including Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, which is quite the philosophical book to discuss what could there be beyond this. It's a big question. So I definitely have some thoughts on it. I would love to talk with you about it, but I would rather do it without interrupting Brianna.
Okay. Well, let's plan on that. So tomorrow, this is Tuesday. So tomorrow I got to get ready to talk to Michelle for part 2, because I felt like we were very rushed. I felt like Michelle and I were very rushed 2 weeks ago. So then we'll finish our conversation. She's the Christian theologian, PhD level Christian theologian. So Brianna will respond next Tuesday then from the Satanist perspective. So we will see how that goes. And then you will. I feel like if we got everybody together, I feel like it would be a joke.
A priest, a rabbi.
Right. I know. It's like, okay. So, yes. So a Christian theologian, a Satanist, a Jew, and if Cameron is here, a Sufi Muslim, and an atheist all walk into a bar, that sounds like it's the start of a joke. Well, what's funny is the kinds of people we're bringing together here.
Well, what's funny is what unites all of us is storytelling.
Right. Yeah. So okay. So then that's what we'll do then. Then I'm interested. Then we'll say that 2 weeks. Then we still have a lot more Star Trek to cover too. But there's just a lot of things to cover. But then we'll figure in 2 weeks. Then trilogy. We'll be back and we'll be responding to Brianna and Michelle together, because I'm very interested in that too. Did you? I think I asked you, but do you watch this YouTube channel Esoterica? And I actually think James Bacon actually put me onto this channel.
No.
Look up Esoterica. He is he talks about mythology and things like that. He himself is like, is he Jewish or is he a Jewish rabbi? I'm not sure if he's actually a rabbi or not. But I love Esoterica. Yeah, I know. We need to get a Catholic. See, I'm the weird one here because I'm the atheist. But if I were going to go in on this, I would become Catholic. So that's my Dr. Justin Sledge. So that's a good one to. So he's Jewish, but he himself is not a rabbi. Okay, that's what I thought. But man, I have really been enjoying his. So thank you so much, James, for turning me on to his channel, because I have not listened to as much of it as I want to yet, but I have been have his stuff bookmarked. Because because even one thing I wanted to talk about, Brianna sent me some stuff on Satanist Oh wait, what's the word I'm looking for? What do you call it? Satanist panic. That's not exactly the word I'm looking for. What do you call it when you got like people are afraid of people playing Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh, like hysteria.
Yeah, Satanist hysterica and stuff like that. Brianna sent me some stuff on Satanist hysterica and stuff like that. Satanic, thank you. Panic is the word I'm looking for. A satanic panic. Yes. So Brianna sent me some stuff on a satanic panic, and I really do want to actually do a conversation on that on its own, because with Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, we've experienced the satanic panic, and I think that's a really interesting conversation to have. Brianna sent me some information, but that information that she sent me on the satanic panic didn't actually tell me anything about like modern day Satanism. It was more about like, you know, the satanic panic, which I was watching with different things. Yeah. So we will see. Because I have an interesting. Well, we'll see what your perspective. In 2 weeks, we'll see what your perspective on this is, Doug. But you know, I have right. I think I watched his episode on the Satanic Panic because I have a very specific. I have a very specific kind of thought about what I think of as Satanism, and what I'm willing to be involved with, and what I'm not. Because I think that I bring an interesting. I think that I will bring an interesting philosophy or approach to this conversation, because even though I don't believe in Satan, like as an actual, I do have a strong opinion about what type of things I will be associated with and what I will not.
Right.
You know, and then why I would do one thing and why I would not do another thing. So I think that would be another, well, see, okay, we're going to talk about that. James says Satanism is about venerating the self. And I have a problem with that.
Interesting.
I have a problem.
I'm very loose on actual Satanism. But it's weird. Like there's like weird, like it's gaining momentum, like as an actual, like organized religion almost.
So this is going to be an interesting 2 weeks. I need to talk to Michelle. I want to bring up Satanism to Michelle tomorrow. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, I'm going to tune into that. I heard your last conversation with her, which was outstanding. I will say, on philosophical levels, debates and actual deep discussions about good and evil can be some of the most compelling discussions out there.
Well, I want them to be discussions because, like I said, I mean, I have some thoughts on that, but I also don't really think that any of us who are going to show up on the show are going to convince the other person of something.
Well, I don't
they
think
might in the long term, but I'm talking about in the short term in a conversation. You can't approach this from winning something.
No, I don't think that's the purpose of having people talk about it. I think the idea is it's like a palette with a bunch of colors on it. You're going to put them all on the canvas and see what it looks like to have a debate with all these different perspectives. I don't think it's a versus, like us versus them type of discussion.
Have you ever read the book The War of Art?
No.
This was a fantastic book. It's called The War of Art.
I will say briefly, real quick, Sable Phoenix. I have started reading this.
Oh,
and I'm blown away. I love it.
Oh, really? Oh, I have not started yet.
Love it.
Let me just say, Sable Phoenix can come on one day. We got to do that too, because I have it right here too.
Oh yeah. Cheers.
Okay. So, all right. So we see, this is another thing we got to do. But I'm gonna read this too. And Sable Phoenix, you may have to come on and have a discussion about this, because I've got this book too here. So we will have that.
I didn't know what to expect about it, but it's completely blown me away right off the bat. I'm in chapter 3, which is Yearning. The chapter's called Yearning. And so far, everything the author is saying just resonates with me and smacks of reality, a good grasp of reality in terms of fiction writing.
Well, okay. So just to wrap things up, because they finished their thing, there's this book called The War of Art. And it is written by Stephen Pressfield, and I am a huge Stephen Pressfield fan.
Okay.
Stephen Pressfield wrote the book The Gates of Fire, which is one of my favorite. It's a historical fiction book, but
but it's one of my favorite books of all time. No
The
joke.
Gates of
The
Fire?
Gates of Fire. It is about the Spartans at Thermopylae.
Oh, wow.
He got an honorary citizenship to Sparta because of this book.
No way.
Yeah, because Stephen Pressfield was a Marine, and then he decided to become a historical fiction author. And he's written other books as well, but like the book that I absolutely love of his, which in today's world, it's not a series of books, it's just one book, and it's called The Gates of Fire. And I would love to talk about this book one day. And it is about the Spartans at Thermopylae. And God, I love that book.
And
it might be my favorite. It's fictionalized, right? Yeah.
It's not like a history book.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, he did a lot of research to it, but he also applies a lot of modern day terminology for instance, one of the things that initially when I read that book was kind of strange to me is that he uses modern day military terminology to describe the Spartans. And so that was initially jarring to me. But then I realized as I went on, especially as I really appreciated the story, he was like to me, I think that's kind of jarring because I'm like, wait a minute, this is a Spartan and he's using modern day military terminology to refer to a platoon. But then I realized that, oh my God, what he's doing is he's trying to use modern terminology to not use like weird ancient Greek, 3rd century terminology.
Because you couldn't relate to it.
Yeah, he's using modern terminology so that if you're not me, then you would just absorb that terminology and what's going on. And oh my God, I love this.
Interesting. It would give it, instead of a weird, bizarre, historical, hard to understand feel, it gives it a military feel immediately.
Yes. I used this book when I was teaching military geography at the university.
Wow.
To understand militarism in society. Oh God, we should totally read this book and go. I could go through this book like chapter by chapter.
Wow.
Because I love this book. In fact, it has inspired me in Theophany. I will tell you that when you read the first chapter of Theophany that I wrote, you're going to completely understand that, oh, this is inspired by Stephen Pressfield's first chapter of Gates of Fire.
Well, I wrote it down because I read, like I said, a lot of military nonfiction and fiction. I've read a lot of military fiction as well. Like Matterhorn, which is about the Vietnam War. Incredible. Anyway, well, I would be down to talk about these things as well.
I will go through that in depth. No, and actually, so this is the only book, because I was telling friends of mine and family members, God, you have got to read The Gates of Fire. This is freaking fantastic. You've got to read this. And other friends of mine, like my aunt, was like, I stopped reading it because it was too violent.
Oh, really?
And that's because I understand stopping watching a TV show or a movie because it's too violent, because you like what you're watching. But this is the only book that people have ever told me I stopped reading this book because it's too violent. Because he's not afraid to okay, the Spartans are going to war. What is that like?
Yeah, I don't mind violence. I'll never stop reading a book because it's too violent.
Well, but it's the depiction of violence.
Right.
He depicts violence in a particular way in this. Okay, man, I would love to talk about this movie. There are like 50 topics we've got, but I would go through this movie in a heartbeat. Where was I going with that? So I was going with that. Stephen Pressfield. That's why he's probably my second favorite author after Tolkien. J.R. Tolkien is my favorite, but then Stephen Pressfield is probably my second favorite author because of The Gates of Fire.
Wow.
But then he wrote this book called The War of Art, which is a nonfiction book, which is just talking about how you as an individual deal with getting your artistic creation done.
Oh man.
And I would love to talk about this book too, because it's almost like a toilet book, in the sense that it's like each chapter is only like a page long. So there's
so it's very easy to get through and read.
Right. If you hey, what's he like, you look at the topic, and then you've got like a page on what he says about that. And then he goes on. And I have actually said that if I were to start a religion,
This is how it ties into the Satanism, because that, like, with all that if I were to start a religion, I would use the War of Art as our religious text. Because
Interesting.
yeah. That's, I would totally do this.
I'm looking for it right now.
I would say that the War of Art, because what I would say, because he uses evil, he has this force that he calls the resistance. And the resistance in that book is anything that stops you from achieving your creative potential.
Huh.
So
Okay.
whatever it is that stops you from being the most creative person you can be is the resistance. So rather than sin, I just thought it was so great that he sets up basically another kind of religion. I was like, man, this should be a religion that we're all supposed to be as creative as we can possibly be and create all this stuff. But what is the force that stops us from creating? Stephen Pressfield calls that resistance. So every day when you sit down to write your novel, everything that's fighting you is the resistance. And I was like, my God, that's like the force of evil. That if I were to create a religion, we would use this book as our text. We are all trying to achieve our maximum creativity, and everything that is against us in the world is the resistance.
Wow. Have you ever heard of Julia Cameron, the Artist's Way?
I have not. No.
She was the first time. It was a pretty popular book way back in the day, but it was the first time I read a book about being an artist where it had a quasi-religious feel to it. Very similar to what you're describing, where I was like, if there is an inherent good in creation, or the idea of creation, or being creative, or creativity, because it is a weird thing, creativity. It seems to come from some weird wellspring inside. There is some cosmic something there, archetypes, the human side. So, it was interesting to hear about it because it did seem to have a supernatural almost kind of touch to it. And then she also gets her book was 20 something years old. And it was a little too not touchy feely, but like hippie-ish for me, I guess. I like things to be a little bit more grounded, I guess. But she had a very similar thing, like what's stopping you and how to identify that and all this other stuff. So that's why I'm really curious about this other guy's take. If you're saying there's a quasi-religious angle to it, at a minimum, then maybe that's going to be very similar. Wow, he's got a lot, 10,000 ratings. Yeah, it's a 2.5-hour book on audio.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, like I said, maybe what we end up having to do is go 2 times a week or something, because there's so much to cover.
Well, let's put it on a list. We'll work on it. We'll work talk about it.
I would love to do an analysis of The Gates of Fire, which is just the historical fiction. And then I would also love to just do an analysis of his thoughts on creativity. That Stephen Pressfield lives about 2 blocks from Cameron.
No.
I know, because I was talking to Cameron and I was like, I love Stephen, and Stephen was like, and then Cameron was like, oh yeah, he lives just down the road from me, and Cameron's has been able to have lunch with him. And I was like, oh my God, you've had lunch with Stephen Pressfield? Oh my God.
We'll have to go out to LA one of these days and take those guys out to lunch or something.
I know. Wait a minute. I've seen Stephen Pressfield on YouTube in a bunch of different things. Wait a minute. What is this guy's name? There is this guy who is a warrior. Let's just say, man, I can't remember his name. I'm never gonna come up with this. But he's one of the coolest guys as far as gunfighting goes. But Stephen Pressfield is also, a former Marine, and then he comes on. And so I've seen Stephen Pressfield on YouTube videos with this other former Marine talking about like combat and how to deal with being a warrior, and also how to deal with getting older and bringing other new warriors up behind you. I'll post that in the Discord channel when I find it.
That sounds interesting to me. I'll tell you what, believe it or not, I study, I've even read Bruce Lee books. There's a lot about being a war. I think about, in terms of the warrior ethos, I think about it a lot because it helps me understand the hero's journey archetypally. And there's a lot there. That's why I do not. Yep. exactly, Sable. That's why I do not, even though I'll say maybe the military is certainly not above reproach or criticism. I have a high respect for those who have followed the warrior ethos, including the American military and militaries through history. Like I have a high respect for the warrior in general.
Well,
That's why I don't put down the hero's journey, even though I wrote this whole book on the heroine's labyrinth. Believe it or not, a lot of that book came from a place of love that started with all these movies we talk about. The hero's journey, Star Trek, Star Wars, like my understanding of themes and archetypes and arcs and all of those things is where that stuff came from. It didn't come from any sort of activism, I guess. A lot of the books today start with activism, and sometimes I think they get too absorbed in it. But I come from a place of storytelling, entertainment, love, like love of those things, like you guys, like when a certain moment happens in the movie Aliens, I can watch it a million times. It'll never get old. Like I love it.
Yeah,
when Han Solo comes in at the end of Star Wars.
Does this come around to the conversation that we had earlier? Let's see if we can finish that. Does that mean, so I have no military experience. You said you also have no military experience.
I have no military experience.
So did we miss something major there? Like, is there, should we have? I mean, I wonder about that. I do wonder about that.
What do you mean?
Well, that when my grandfather said, if you don't join you don't have to join the military, but if you do join if you don't join the military, you're going to miss out on a completely different side of life. You know,
well,
he was
I
telling
think
me
it's
that.
True.
So if I missed something that I just cannot understand?
I think it's totally possible because the reason believe it or not, it helps me with storytelling. When you read military books, there's something about the reality of the world that you're getting a glimpse of, even if it's a filtered glimpse, even if it's a biased glimpse or a critical glimpse, or, like I've read books that are critical about American wars. I've read books that are very positive. I've read both. But at the end of the day, you are seeing reality. There's something about reality that's going on. There's a struggle there. People are willing to die for this struggle. It should be taken seriously. That's why the hero's journey is timeless. You will always find a warrior willing to go protect the homeland or to go out and confront evil from this cultural point of view, an encroaching, militant subjugator, and fight them and fight to the death in order to do it. That will never disappear. I think the reason people think the hero's journey is expired is because we haven't really had an existential war. Thank God for such a long time that people might be forgetting that we still might, that existential wars can still happen and we'll still need war.
Well, Ukraine is having that right now.
What's that?
Ukraine is having that right now.
Ukraine is in an existential fight while the world sits by and watches. It's happening. So my point is, like, that will never get expired. I admire people that dream of a day where we don't have wars for real. That's great. I would love that. But the reality is we're going to have another one, and we'll have another one after that. Like it's going to happen. So, and you need people, men or women, who go toward the enemy instead of running away from them. And it's hard to get people to do that. And the hero's journey actually is an archetypal, almost cosmic story of how that has actually happened in real life, and it's preserved in this pattern. So anyway, just to tie it back into stories, I have no military experience, but I have a high regard and a high respect for people who have had military experience.
I tried everything I possibly could do to get into a war zone, I suppose.
Really?
Yeah. I tried because after I decided instead of joining the military, I decided to go to graduate school. So that's
a war zone.
Well, no, I decided to go to graduate school, but then I was trying to after graduate school, I was like, I want to get into a war zone, and so I was trying everything I could do. I suppose short of actually just like selling everything I own and flying into some zone. Okay, not that. But like I was applying for every job I possibly could to get into a war zone.
Oh, wow.
And I was rejected every time.
Wow.
So I tried all of them. It was actually fun. Like when I was done with my PhD, The human terrain. Have you ever heard of the human terrain teams? This is going on, but have you heard of human terrain teams? The human terrain teams were something that would be embedded with the U.S. military forces, especially in Afghanistan or Iraq, to deal with to help them deal with the indigenous people.
Right.
And it tore apart the discipline of anthropology. I was very connected with anthropology because I was in geography, but as it happens, geography and anthropology are very connected generally in overlap of people or thought and things like that. So there were a lot of people who were, cross-pollinating between geography and anthropology. I mean, I had done an anthropology minor and stuff like that. And whether or not you were going to be part of a human terrain team was tearing the discipline of anthropology apart. Because it was, because some people were like, listen, if we can help U.S. military personnel, like actually on the ground, dealing with individual people, then we should be there. Like figuring that out. Like if there is an infantry platoon walking through Afghanistan and there is an opportunity for like an anthropologist to be there with them, is that a good idea or a bad idea? And there were some people who were like, that's a good idea. Like we will be right there at the ground level trying to understand, the Afghani tribal situation. Maybe we can make a difference when like there is a platoon of infantry walking through Afghanistan, like there.
Really trying to build a bridge of some kind.
Yeah. And then other people are like, no, the presence of infantry there means that it is not something that academic anthropologists need to do. It was a huge divide in anthropology.
I was going to say that's a big pro and a big con in both directions.
It was a huge divide. And because I remember all of that going on, because like I said, I had graduate friends who were graduate students in anthropology at the time. But I was applying to be part of the human terrain teams.
Wow.
I want to do that if I can be there, because the job descriptions actually perfectly fit what I was doing as a geographer. But they wanted people who actually had a technical anthropology degree. So that's why it didn't technically happen. But I was like, okay, I will go there. And I said, I'm going to go there and I'm going to see what I can do. Like I was completely ready to go there. I was trying to go there as a human terrain teams expert. I told my other friends who are in graduate school, I was like, I may come back with a completely different opinion. I may come back and be like, oh my God, that was terrible. What are we doing? But I was going to try it, and actually I was going to be there. I was going to see what it was like. And then I was going to inform my opinion based on what was actually there. And my thinking was that if I could actually help on the ground at that level, I was going to do it.
Well, I think that's the ideal. People always, like, I remember even when the Iraq war was going on, there was a huge discussion. There's the discussion about hearts and minds. It's one thing to have a military presence, but the ideal is to not have a military presence. That people really wanted to give up the life they lived under an authoritarian regime or something and really try to attempt a life similar to ours. I think, and in order to do that, there's a lot of cultural barriers. And so I think that the ideal would be to have people that can bridge those gaps and lessen the negative impact a patrolling soldier might have through a village, for instance, or the more heavy-handed, going house to house, looking for bad guys, which gets ugly.
Yeah.
So. But to the other's point, you're putting civilians into a war zone who aren't actual combat ready soldiers and could be taken hostage or brutally murdered or viewed not through the lens of, hey, we're trying to work together, but you're the bad guy and I kill you.
But well, there's that. But the perspective of academic anthropology was that you were then part of an imperialist enterprise. That was the way they perceived it.
Well, that's academia would
right.
Certainly...
You cannot partake in this enterprise because then you are part of an imperialist enterprise. So that's why it was breaking apart anthropology. Because some people are like, listen, if I can help, then I want to go. And the other people, the other side was saying that if you
go, then you are inherently part of an imperialist.
I thought it was going to be a little bit more academic. That's a little bit more ideological.
Well, it was very ideological. Yeah,
I was
it
going
was
to say,
very
because an academic might say you can't be involved because now you're altering the anthropological circumstance. You know, it's like in science, by observing it, you change it. Like
right.
in
You're right.
physics.
Yes.
I would imagine an academic response is that you're altering, you're disrupting the culture. You know, not that you're part of an imperialist enterprise. You know,
I was never able to get one of those jobs, and it was because I didn't have prior experience in a war zone. That's why. I found out when I was applying to those jobs that if you had already been part of the U.S. military and had been deployed to those jobs, then it was very easy to get other jobs there to send you back. But if you were a civilian like me who didn't have prior experience in a war zone, it was very difficult to get in. So I never got I never got a job offer. I tried. I was like, I'm going. Like, I applied for everything I possibly could. I was like, I will go. I will see. I might change my mind on the situation, but you know, we will see. But before I did this, after I did this, I had a job at the University of South Florida in Tampa.
Oh yeah,
and
the
I
Bulls,
got a job.
right?
I'm sorry.
Aren't they the Bulls?
I believe they are. Yeah. I got a job there, and there was another I got a job there as a temporary instructor, and there was another temporary instructor that was also there. And when I was talking to him, he and I were applying to the exact same jobs with the human terrain team.
Oh, really?
He and I were applying to the exact same jobs, and he had been accepted. He was there because he had been accepted and chosen not to take it. And I was there because I had been rejected, and so I had to take this job.
Oh, wow. That's wild.
Yeah, so he had actually been accepted to the exact same human terrain team job.
And then he changed his mind?
Wanted. Well, yeah, he decided not to take it because he was married. The reason that he got that job is because he had done research with the IRA, the Irish Republican Army.
Oh, wow.
So he had actually been on the ground doing academic research with the IRA. So
Holy
they had
cow.
counted that as being in a war zone.
Oh, yeah.
So he had done research there. So that's why he was allowed to go. That was his in to the human terrain team. But then apparently he got 2 job offers. He got a job offer at the University of South Florida and a job offer with the U.S. Army in Afghanistan. And he was like, he told his wife, okay, I got 2 job offers. I can go to Afghanistan or
Yeah, we know which one the wife's
Florida.
going to pick.
And so his wife was like, okay, Florida.
Yeah, okay, so we're not doing Afghanistan, honey.
So that's what happened there. So it was interesting that we were both there, but I was like, we both applied to the exact same jobs in Afghanistan. I was rejected. He was accepted, but so I had to come here. But he had rejected the job in order to come here because his wife was like, "Okay, Afghanistan, not that. Let's just go hang out in Florida. That sounds like a better deal."
Yeah, Afghanistan, from everything I've read, sounds like some pretty tough area.
Well, you know, I got there. I did get there. This is going on. I did get to go to Afghanistan later.
Really?
Yeah. I got to go to Afghanistan as part of a U.S. State Department grant.
What?
So I got to go to Afghanistan, and the thing was that because I was like, I have got to have in-field experience. I've got to have experience in a war zone because that's why I'm not getting any of these jobs because I don't have prior experience. So I was like, I will do anything to get experience in Afghanistan. Or Iraq or whatever. But I was like, so this opportunity came up with the U.S. State Department to go to Afghanistan to teach at the Kabul University, University in Kabul.
Holy shit.
And I was like, okay, I'll do it. I'll totally do it.
Wow.
Because I wanted to have experience in.
So you've been to Kabul?
Yeah, I was in Kabul and was teaching geographic information systems. And I taught class, and there was a guy with an AK-47. I was under guard the entire time with a guy. I taught class with a guy with an AK-47 in the class.
So a lot like when you do a YouTube live stream.
Like we were told it was like we're going to be moving from this position to this position. You do not open your door. When you are in transit between one place to another, when you are in transit from your barracks to the university, you do not, under any circumstances, open your door or roll down your window. Because there is no guarantee that those like police officers or actual police officers, they could be terrorists who are going to shoot you. So they said that the only thing that you will ever do is you will put up your passport to the window. If you need to identify yourself, you are stopped, you're in a bulletproof vehicle, you will put up your passport on the window so that you can identify yourself that way. You will never open the door and never roll down that window. Because there were the Gurkha soldiers who swept all of our vehicles when we came in. Like we were Gurkha who were like sweeping with and also like mirrors beneath to make sure that when you were coming in, you weren't doing it with a bomb underneath your vehicle.
Yeah.
All of that going on. I was told not to leave the barracks because the State Department did not want to come and look for me while I was in Kabul, like if I were blown up or something like that.
Oh my God.
That was a fantastic experience. I loved that experience.
Wow. How long were you there?
Oh, see, only about a week and a half.
Oh my God.
I was like, you want to go and teach? Because my PhD is in geography. We were in geographic information systems. We were establishing a geographic information systems laboratory in Kabul.
Jesus.
And so the State Department had paid for all of the computers and all of the software to set up a computer lab at the Kabul University. But the problem was nobody knew how to use it. So what the State Department put up was like a 2-week crash course for the professors at the university to figure out how to use the software. So I was there for 2 weeks. And there was another guy. I wasn't there for quite 2 weeks. I don't think it was something like that. It was like I was there at the maximum 2 weeks. And then there was another guy who came in after me. We were teaching the professors how to use the software so that then they could teach the software to everybody else. They're students.
Yeah.
Right? And so I was like, I am totally doing this. Like I am going, I am there. Wow. So I was there. I was like, this is my opportunity. See, I don't think I've ever said this to any of my family members or something like that, because my parents were like, what is going on? Do you remember years ago when there were planes that were shot down over Ukraine by like Russian missiles?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was right before that one plane disappeared in
Indonesia.
Indonesia.
Yeah. That was when I went over to Afghanistan. And I flew through Ukraine in order to get to
planes, right? Wasn't it Malaysia Airplanes?
It may have been.
I can't remember, but I do know what you're talking about. I remember that period.
Because I remember my family members, like that was going on. Like that plane had been shot down over Ukraine. And then I was like, I'm going to Afghanistan. And then like one of my uncles was like, well, at least you're not flying through Ukraine. And then I was like, well, actually, I am flying through Ukraine. And he was like, what is this? Like your whole trip is like called Tempting Fate or something like that. Like,
yeah, that's like the highest risk.
I was like, this is the highest risk kind of way to go through. It was so great. But I don't think I never told, I did it for free.
Oh, I get it. Yeah.
But I didn't tell any of my family members that, like my dad or anybody like that. I was like, okay, I got this opportunity to go to Afghanistan. I'm going to be teaching this. Now, they paid for the plane ticket and they paid for all, so it wasn't like anything in my pocket. But I was like, no, they didn't pay for anything, because I was like, I won't tell any of my family members that I'm like going there for free. No, because at that time I was so desperate. I was like, I need to operate in a war zone. I need to know how to operate. I need that on my resume.
Wow.
And so that was the opportunity to go and be in the war zone. And then after that, nothing ever came after that. But it was so much fun. It was an incredible experience.
Wow. That's wild, man. We could have a military discussion at some point. I mean, that's such a deep well too to go into.
All right. Well, maybe we should wrap it up. So that's 3.5 hours. So that was our casual discussion this evening. So, all right. So a week from now, Brianna and I will be discussing good and evil and storytelling, and she will be bringing her Satanist perspective. Tomorrow night,
Wow.
Michelle with 2 L's from Force of Light Entertainment will be back with me. I have got a bunch of different questions because I felt like we were very compressed last time. So I'm going to try to take a bit of a breather and talk more about the good and evil from the storytelling perspective and how you represent evil from stories. I'm going to try to talk about that with her tomorrow. And then, on Tuesday, the next Tuesday, Brianna will be here. And then after that, Doug, you and I will talk about that.
Awesome, man.
Good and evil and stuff like that. So yes, this was epic. So I really enjoyed this, Doug. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. I always enjoy talking with you, Heath, and I always enjoy the chat. James and Sable, Zero the Blade. Like, it's always good comments in there, man. So
it is. It absolutely is. So, all right. I will see everybody tomorrow morning for the morning grind, and then tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central with Michelle with 2 L's for good and evil and storytelling.
Awesome.
All right, everybody. Later.
All right. Good night, everybody.